evening, 7 o'clock. We'll call to order the Board of Selectmen meeting. First item on our business is the review and approval of minutes.
I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes from September 6th, September 13th, and September 25th as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're going to confirm our future meeting dates. The board will meet again on November 27, 2017. We're probably going to have to check back, Emily and Mike, to get the dates for December right now, since, you know, with the holiday falling on, December 11th will probably work, but I want to just make sure we check the schedule and then try to find a second meeting. Next item of business is citizen speak. Do we have anyone tonight that would like to speak? If you could please come up, state your name, and sign in, that would be great. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Coyle. I live on Bunton Street in East Milton. Good evening. Here, I'm not sure if I'm going to stay long enough for the whole thing, so I wanted to make some points about the possibility of a project on Bassett Street by the Falcone Corporation. My first point here, and this I'm sort of writing this as a response to the October 19th editorial by Coleman Neve from Falcone Properties. Okay, in my opinion, and I've spoken to some people from the EMNA organization as well as residents of East Milton, it's essential that the East Milton traffic and parking needs be solved first before any new development begins. I mean, it's a long, festering problem, as you all know, probably far better than I do. So I think that's one point. The second point is that one of the major concerns is the impact on new development on the East Milton neighborhood, particularly at bus stops, people racing through the streets. You know, many people feel it's out of control. And any new development, whether it be Falcone or somebody else, would lead to more cut-through traffic. The size of the project, and I've discussed some of this with Mr. Clark, our director of planning. So it's not that I've gotten his opinion, kind of informally on some of these things too. The latest iteration of the plans called for an entrance and exit on Bassett Street, which in my opinion is it can't safely accommodate the traffic flow now. It's almost opposite the main entrance to the only supermarket in the area at all, serving most of Milton. And the parking spaces on the south side of the eastbound part of Bassett Street encroach upon the traffic lane. We don't even have a full traffic lane heading eastbound there. I think that's something that the Traffic Commission perhaps should look at more closely. The width of Bassett Street, if any development happens there at all, I think it's time for a taking of some of that property there and widen the street and make it suitable for two-directional traffic. I think many people feel that it isn't now. It's a fight just to get out of the marketplace parking lot now. Comparable projects. I've looked around in the towns around here, Quincy in particular, projects of a comparable size, 60, 70, 80 units, all of them are on a main road. They're not on narrow side streets. I think that's a major flaw in the whole plan that needs to be seriously addressed. I can give one example here. There's a new development called Avalon Apartments on Quarry Street, about halfway up the hill, actually near the top of the hill, opposite the Italian Club. It's a little bigger. It's bigger, but it illustrates the point. 5 stories of apartments over a parking garage. But the main difference, it's set well back from the street with a wide entrance driveway for traffic, so it's safer getting in and out of it and doesn't conflict with the surrounding properties. In Milton, we have no room. We already have 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. It just doesn't work. Second point here on this, I looked up the apartments.com. It's a very common website that people use when going apartment hunting. And the big thing, they all reference the local schools. It's automatic on all the real estate websites. Yet in the presentations by Mr. Corcoran, as well as in this article, there was comments about, well, it's not going to bring any new students or new people. Yet people are single parents might be very suitable in there. So I think this is. It's really that the article in the paper, as well as the presentations, don't take that seriously enough. The second thing here is the slide number 15 in the Falcone presentation I've come up with about 10 items here. I'm not going to read all of them, but we're playing sleight of hand here. There's already tremendous overreach on the lack of parking where previous restaurants. It's nice to have beautiful restaurants there. People enjoy them. Abbey Park, Navarra, some of the other ones, property owners are Mr. Chan's is renovating his place, and other people are doing the same thing. And I think that's great. But the parking and the traffic needs to be adjusted first. Last year at a planning board meeting, I spoke about after Navarra opened up on the parking started to go down to the Congregational Church parking lot, parking without permission. Adams Street narrows. It's much narrower at the corner where the church is on Granite Place than it is closer to the square. There's not even a full lane of traffic there when you're heading westbound towards. So again, I think that's something that the Traffic Commission should take up. My opinion is have no parking on the north side of that, but people will scream. So again, it all comes back to the implementing the master plan for Milton in the proper sequence. Fix the traffic flow, the volume of traffic, and address the parking needs before allowing any major development. And this one is certainly considered major, especially for East Milton. And my last point is the environmental concerns. I have another presentation I've got ready for the planning board. This is, and I'm probably sure I've exceeded my time here, but it's typical for towns such as Milton and others to require a third-party independent review for traffic and for the design of the facility. I'm not sure if this has happened yet. Maybe it's premature for that to happen, but that is a requirement that's very commonplace. That's not, you can't have the design firm, the fox watching the hen house here. That's just not the way it's done in the world. Again, I'm not totally up to speed on that, but I certainly hope that's going to be done, mainly to address all the environmental concerns, which I'll save for another time. So I have a few comments here. So if,
I know we can't comment, but sir, can you just do me one favor for the moment, Liz? Just identify what you do for a living.
okay, I'm retired.
I already know.
I'm mostly retired right now, but my occupation for 45 years has been property development, a whole variety of them, Boston, Chelsea, Attleboro, and many states across the country. I'm currently doing a small project in Quincy right now. We could have put up a large apartment building there, screamed 40B. We chose not to. We put in some high-end townhouses because it fit the neighborhood. We listened to the neighbors a lot more before we put pencil to paper, before we even bought the property. Now, I'm just a consultant to a developer in this case here, but decided to put high-end townhouses. We said, what did the people want first? And didn't get greedy about it or over the top. And that's what So, again, I want to get, that's probably enough, so,
Thank you, Mr. Coyle.
Thank
all
you.
right, very
Appreciate
good.
your input.
Thanks very much.
Do we have anybody else who would like to speak at Citizen Speak? We're going to ask people, we have a huge agenda tonight, if you haven't noticed, so we're going to ask people to limit to 3 minutes, but we certainly want to hear from you. So if you could come up, state your name, and sign in an address, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Where do you sign in?
Right here, Emily, will take it.
Do that after. Hi. I've been in my car. Mark Croninger. I live on Melbourne Road in Milton, in East Milton area, and I've been sitting in a car for the past 4 or 5 hours, so I'm very tired right now, but I didn't know this was happening tonight, so I could be better prepared. But I've attended several of the meetings. I spoke at the church meeting kind of extensively. The gentleman who just spoke was far more articulate than I'm probably going to be tonight, but I thought he did an excellent job from what I heard and the points he raised. I have multiple concerns with regard. I live in that neighborhood. I know what the drive-through is with people cutting through that area all the time. The fruit center situation right now, the parking lot over there and coming in and out of Bassett Street and also on the road that goes to Dependable Cleaners is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I was just there tonight. There's no way that that can accommodate. I don't care, and I've heard the arguments, and I've read the stuff in the Milton Times. There's no way whatever they're proposing can accommodate the traffic and incidental traffic that's going to be in there. Not only from the tenants, but from the guests, from deliveries, from all sorts of other stuff that go in there. But I feel like this whole thing was, and the gentleman mentioned this as well, came to as sort of a fait accompli. I've spoken to several neighbors over there who were never consulted, even though that's what was said at one of the meetings that they had talked to the neighbors. And it just seemed like it was getting rammed down everybody's throat. Aesthetically, that project does not belong in East Milton Square. I feel like the use of a 40B is kind of just a Trojan horse to ram something that doesn't belong in that area into that area. It doesn't look right. It looks like these huge developments that are going up as we go into up 93 into the city, Chinatown area, all that stuff, these huge, just sprawling boxes that are going to be looming over East Milton Square and looming over those things, causing traffic problems. And if it was the right thing to do and if it made sense, they wouldn't be going for a 40B. And we all know that that's an issue in this town and the affordable housing, whatever, but that doesn't mean they should try to scare the neighborhood and scare the town into saying, well, this is going to resolve it. What's it, 5 units? The last I checked, we're going to be in the affordable. And you know what? Don't stick it in East Milton Square and cause a neighborhood that's already got a lot of problems with traffic and density and stuff and make that our problem. There's plenty of places for the Falcones to develop, and if they're, they should have done a little more homework, I think, in advance. And if they really are, it's a real problem for them financially. I live in that neighborhood. I see Zillow all the time. They'll have no problem selling that property and making a little tidy profit in the end. But if it belonged in East Milton Square, they wouldn't have been going for a 40B. It does not belong there. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else for Citizen Speak?
Good evening. My name is Jerry Tauger. I live on Rockwell Avenue in East Milton, and I'll be very brief since the two gentlemen previously have said much of what I wanted to say. But I'd just like to make one point. At the Planning Board meeting on October 26th, Mr. Corcoran spoke, and he spoke for the 475 Adams Street development. And he said initially they were suggesting a multifamily development with 12 to 16 units there. And these are his words, but that would be a big building with too much traffic. And that's on record on Milton Cable, so you can check that I am directly quoting him. And if that is too big with 12 to 16 units, how is it possible to justify what he is proposing in East Milton Square?
Thank you. Do we have anybody else for Citizen Speak?
Again, I'll make this quick because so many people said another thing, but something that's been on my mind about,
just
I'm
say-
sorry,
yeah.
Joseph Curran, 30 Grafton Ave.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, is the size and the scale. And then I have to wonder, when we talk about the property and it has to be developed because they've spent all this money, they now own 3 properties in East Milton Square. There's a shell game in parking. They have the opportunity to bring parking to East Milton Square, satisfying the needs of their existing businesses. And I have to imagine that the 3 buildings they own would be better served and may become more valuable and justify the cost that they've spent on the properties that they already own as parking somehow associated with their existing real estate holdings.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have anybody else for citizen speak?
There's a few people out in the hall. I don't know if they could hear you ask.
Anybody out in the hall for citizen speak this evening?
Gareth. Hi, my name's Gareth Conaghy. I live on Franklin, which is like 3 houses down from the development. I mean, I feel the same way, but I mean, I think there's, you know, I wasn't at the last few meetings in the church, but I think there's 200 or 300, 400 people in the square that feel the same way. And I mean, I don't know anybody that lives around me that's for this development. Traffic in the morning, just trying to get my son to school, is a nightmare. I mean, I've got videos I can show you guys offline so you guys can take a look at it. But just going from my house to try get on to Adam Street in the morning is a nightmare. And if you throw this on top of what we have now, it's going to be impossible. And there's a lot of other, you know, things that we can throw on top of that. But for me, that's one of the main points. That's the killer. Plus, aesthetically, the thing is it's a monster. It's just going to be gigantic, and we're going to lose the feel of East Milton being a village versus being a city, and that's kind of what I want to throw on top of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Citizen speak.
All right.
My name's Scott Love. I live on Bates Road. Lived there 27 years, and I have never seen traffic as bad as it's gotten in the last few years. I mean, 10 years ago it was bad, but it's gotten 10 times worse since then. Also, another thing that happens in the neighborhood that's really bad is whenever there's construction going on in the square right now, like when they were building some of the restaurants and renovating the house, all of the construction vehicles were coming through our neighborhood. So what my concern is, if there's going to be a construction project this size in the square, what's that going to do to our neighborhood with all the construction vehicles? Because they're dropping dumpsters off in our neighborhood and then picking them up, and they're doing this at 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes, when they're not supposed to be doing it till I think 7. So I'm just afraid of what will happen with a project that size in the square. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else for citizen speak? Okay, seeing that we don't, we're going to... Oh, we do have someone else. I'm sorry. We have Emily.
To completely sidebar from this, Emily Martin, 4 Hope Avenue, and I just wanted to thank everybody who came out for the Mike's 5K to crush substance abuse. On our last email, we raised $57,000 prior to paying out any of our costs, which is absolutely incredible. We had over 500 people across the finish line, which for the first year is amazing. And one thing that I want to focus on next year is to create teams in support of or in memory of people also, because it is still such a stigmatized issue. Kind of want to open that up because I do a lot of other volunteer activities around other, diseases and issues, and it's always a big component of the fundraising. So I think that's what we're going to reach for next year, and I just wanted to thank everybody again for all your support.
Thanks for your hard work, Emily. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda number 5. I'm going to open up a public hearing related to tax classification. We have Bob Bushway, who is going to join us. And this public hearing is on property tax classification, specifically to make decisions regarding the property tax burden to be borne on by each class of property: residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Good evening, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
We're also joined by Chair Jim Anderson as well from
We're going.
the Board of Assessors. How are you, Jim?
Hey, Jim.
Thank you. How you doing?
Pretty good.
So we do have a more robust presentation, but we decided to go with a condensed version tonight because of the lengthy agenda you guys have. And I think if you do have questions, hopefully we can dovetail into your answers there. But I think Jim's going to start off tonight with the letter from the assessors.
Yes, to the Board of Selectmen. Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws requires the Board of Selectmen to make policy decisions regarding the property tax burden to be borne by each class of property: residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal. The Massachusetts Department of Revenue has reviewed and approved the valuation of all real and personal property for fiscal year 2018. The changes to this year's assessed values are based on property sales in calendar year 2016 and new growth due to additions, renovations, and new construction throughout the town. The result is that the average single-family home has increased in value from $625,017 to $659,179, a 5.5% increase year over year. The total taxable value of the town has grown by 5.6%. The estimated fiscal year 2018 tax levy of $79,599,011 represents a 7.6% increase over the fiscal year 2016 tax levy. This increase includes the override amount of $3,137,264 approved by the voters of Milton last spring. Encloses the information that will serve as a guideline for making these decisions. Respectfully submitted, the Board of Assessors.
So did everybody get the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next page details some of the options that the selectmen are required to choose. The board has made a recommendation, but ultimately it's the selectmen that decide which way the shift should be presented. If you look at the very bottom, currently the fiscal 17 shift right now is 1.55, which the selectmen voted last year to approve. I've laid out 6 options, 1 through 6, and the shift typically stays roughly the same because of the way the value rolls out. If we would go to a single tax rate, for example, the residential rate would go way up, the commercial rate would go way down, and it just doesn't add up. So typically, we try to stay within that 1.55 range. So this year, the board voted at their last meeting to stick to the 1.55, which is option 2 here. What that does to the average single-family tax bill, it increases $635. Again, that's in large part of the override that was approved. That represents about 60% of that increase is due to the override. And then on the commercial side, the increase would be a little over $1,100 for the average commercial taxpayer. There's other options there that you can take a look at. If you notice, the tax rate on the residential side really doesn't change a whole lot. That's because 96% of the value in town is residential, so to shift anything over to the commercial base doesn't move the tax rate a whole lot, and it really impacts the commercial taxpayer a lot more because their rate
It's about a $7 difference
Right.
in a couple of the options, and just over about $13 in the other option, right?
So on an annual tax increase of $635, that'd be about $155, $58 in each quarterly bill?
Yes.
Divided into quarter.
The other thing I'll point out is that that's just an average. So we're including all the new growth, all the new houses. So that's kind of skewing the average single-family tax increase because you're all lumping in new additions, all new brand new houses. So that's going to elevate the average. For the existing taxpayer, in fact, 92% of all the single-family homes are increasing 5%. A 5% increase. So that extra 0.5% is a result of all the new growth in town. So it's kicking up the average a little bit.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board?
No, I think it's consistent with what we've done in the past years, and you're recommending that we not adopt a small commercial exemption or a residential exemption, and that's been your consistent recommendation for many years now.
It stayed the same, right? Right.
So I'll move that we adopt a minimum residential factor of 97.7357, that we not adopt a residential exemption, and we not adopt a small commercial exemption.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing that we have no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Next order of business is a conference and approval with the Board of Health on a new appointment. Ann Fiddler, who served for some time, and we want to thank Ann for her service, has stepped down. So attending tonight, we have members of the Board of Health and Caroline Kinsella, our Health Director. Roxanne, how are you?
Laura?
This is Laura Richards.
Hi, Laura, how are you?
Laura, how are you?
Nice to see you. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
So the Board of Health would like to thank Ann Fiddler for her dedication, passion, knowledge, and commitment to public health, and thank you for serving 10 years on the Board of Health. Thank you, Ann Fiddler. She was instrumental, a great asset, and we'll be sorry that she's leaving. She's moving from Milton. We interviewed 3 candidates, all of whom had excellent qualifications, but one person rose to the top. Mary Stenson is a longtime Milton resident. She's well-rounded, she's qualified, she's personable, and she's very interested in all aspects of health in the town of Milton. The Board of Health unanimously approved and voted on Mary Stenson as a board member till April 2018.
Great. Any other commentary? Obviously, you had some great candidates, and it was probably very difficult to come to a decision. But I'm sure that, with the group that you have,
I think Mary will be a great fit.
that's perfect. That's great to hear.
I know Mary very well, so I think that she'll do a great job.
I agree. I think she has a good background, and I noticed by her address that she lives under one of the flight paths, so for purposes of working with the Board of Health.
Is that on her resume? I didn't see that on her resume.
Well, I noticed the address.
You're right.
But,
yeah.
but we are looking to try to work a little more closely with the Board of Health on the airplane issues, so I think that's having someone who's got that personal experience too is another thing that she brings to the table, as well as her background as a nurse and her health background.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having looked through the qualifications, she's definitely, a great fit, and will be, someone who we'll look forward to working with as well as we work side by side with you all. So we have a motion in front of us now.
Go ahead, Deb, go ahead. I'll read that. So I'll make a motion to appoint Mary Stenson to the Board of Health to serve through April of 2018.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks for all coming in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was an easy one. That was great. Thanks.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, item number 7 now is a conference related to the Payment in lieu of Taxes Committee.
Michael's here.
We have Michael Zulis. Yep. Item number 7. So, for folks at home, the pilot committee has been meeting, and we have Jim Henderson, Chairman of the Board of Assessors, who's on the committee as well. Been meeting monthly since the summer, and it's a follow-up to the great work that a previous committee led by Dimitri Petillon and many others, in terms of helping create policy and to take a good look at, we understand that we're paying a lot in taxes, and we just had an override, and we feel it's our responsibility as a board, and that's why we moved this committee forward to find ways to work with our nonprofits. As you know, Boston has done this fairly successfully, and with 3 large nonprofits in town, Curry College, Milton Hospital, Milton Academy, felt it was incumbent upon us to have some good discussions. I will say that Curry has been very proactive in this by giving a donation every year and doing an awful lot for the community. And so has the Milton Hospital. Though they haven't given a monetary donation, they give an awful lot in many other ways to the community, and I think we can all be very thankful for that. But, I think this is a greater discussion. And I think that, this committee, which has been comprised of myself, Town Administrator Michael Dennehy, Michael Zulis, Jim Henderson from the Board of Assessors, and Matt Keswick, I think we're trying to do our due diligence to find ways to find relief for the taxpayers of Milton in any possible way that we can. So I'll turn it over to you, Mike, now.
Sure. Thank you. Chairman Burns, Secretary Conlon, Member Wells.
Mr. Zulus, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. My afternoon coffee is just about ready to kick in, so I think I'm going to be fine for the next hour or so. As the chair laid out, our charge, beginning this summer, around about June or July, was to try to implement the policy, the pilot policy that was adopted by the town approximately a year and a half ago. And there are three components to that policy that actually, I just want to point out the fifth member of our committee couldn't be here tonight, Matt Keswick, and Matt was with me, part of the negotiating team, and so I feel a little bit vulnerable without Matt here tonight. But hopefully you'll indulge me. So the three key aspects of the pilot policy. First, to gauge an approximate amount of what nonprofits should pay for the services provided by the town. The policy established an amount of at least 25% of the full tax levy. And this is, as in many respects, this policy mirrors the Boston policy that was put into place in 2012. That figure of 25% is used in Boston. It's been used in other communities as well. And that was the estimate that this town used in its policy. Second, the policy provides for a 5-year phase-in for agreements with the nonprofits in order to try to mitigate the budgetary impact for the nonprofits. The idea is if you increase the amount of the payments over 5 years, start at a small amount and increase over 5 years, you can mitigate the budgetary commitment of the nonprofits. And so that's another part of the policy if you can achieve a pilot agreement. And then finally, the policy provides for a 50% cut to that 25% of the tax levy for what's called community benefits. And as the chair laid out, and as we've learned over the last few months, as some of us knew, but we learned a lot about what these nonprofits do in the community, all of them, particularly Curry College and the hospital, and also Milton Academy. They do a lot in the community. They certainly provide a lot, and so this policy provides for a reduction of the pilot payment by up to 50% for that community benefit. So over the last few months, we've been meeting with the nonprofits, and I must say that it has been a very open, transparent, congenial process. All three of the nonprofits were more than welcoming and more than happy to meet with us. We met with the leadership of the hospital and of Milton Academy on 2 occasions. We met with the leadership of Curry College. We had follow-ups with the leadership of Curry College, and so it has been a very good process, very good dialogue throughout the last few months, starting in, I think our first meetings were in August, and then we had our last meetings just last week. And so what we did, and it was the committee had appointed Matt Keswick and myself to be the negotiating team. So we were actually the two who went in and talked with and had a dialogue with these nonprofits. So what we did in order to try to reach an agreement with the nonprofits was to say, look, we recognize that these nonprofits contribute to the community, and let's engage in a process over the next year to quantify what those amounts are. But we're going to give you the maximum credit right up front. Let's just take that off the table. We're going to assume that. Let's make this a win-win and try to publicize to the community all the wonderful things that these nonprofits do to make up that 50% credit. So we gave the nonprofits that 50% credit. We told them if we can get a deal, we give them that 50% credit up front. We also offered each of the nonprofits the five-year phase-in in order to mitigate the budgetary impact in the short term for them, and hopefully over the 5 years they could plan the amounts as an increase to the effectively 12.5%, which is half of the 25% of the taxable income. So you'll see with our offer of for the first year for each of the nonprofits, the hospital was just over $47,000, which is a very small percentage of their revenue. Again, same Curry College, an additional amount of almost $54,000. As David, Chairman Burns pointed out, Curry College has been paying. Curry College is the only nonprofit that has been paying for many, many years. They've been paying pursuant to a non-binding one-page memorandum of understanding that was signed in 2005, and they've been paying that since then. Those amounts in that memorandum of understanding, which is non-binding on both parties, don't comport with the policy that was adopted by the town a year and a half ago. And so as Curry has been paying, this policy would mandate an additional payment from Curry, a higher payment from Curry, to meet that essentially 12.5% of the taxable amount. So again, Curry, we asked for an additional payment on top of the payment they've made this year. Again, a very small percentage of their revenue. And these numbers that you have up here, the revenue for the three institutions, that comes from their own IRS filings. The nonprofits are required to file their IRS 990 forms with the Attorney General's office every year, and these are the latest filings in the Attorney General's office. That's where we took those numbers. Unfortunately, the results of our discussions have not led to agreements to date. And I think it's fair to say that with respect to each of them, the hospital, they told us that they were open to it and that they would consider it at some undeterminate date in the future. They would not be able to consider it before the end of the year. But they were open to it. They acknowledged the importance of it, I think, and they were certainly open to continuing discussions. The time frame is a little unclear, but they were certainly open to that. Curry College, again, a very good dialogue, and is open to considering that as part of their next fiscal year, which begins in June 1st. They have a June 1st fiscal year. So they were open to considering that for their next fiscal year. And Milton Academy, again, it was a good dialogue, but Milton Academy's view, as stated to us, was that a pilot agreement is not warranted at this time. And so that is the status, if you will, of the discussions that we've had. And then with respect to each of the nonprofits, this committee, I think it's fair to say, felt it incumbent to make recommendations with respect to the policy. This policy is in place, and the committee, I believe, felt that it was incumbent upon us to make a recommendation to take action under this policy because it's been in place for a year and a half, and we think there should be some action taken. For context, obviously Beth Israel Deaconess, the hospital, they take in about $92 million. This is from 2014, about $92 million in revenue, about $2 million in revenue less expenses, and net assets of about $66 million. Again, that's from their filings. And then the pilot amount in the next slide is taken from the taxable value of the property that we're talking about here, which is approximately $87 million. If fully taxable, that would be about a $1.8 million tax bill. The 25% amount is $471,000, almost $48,000, and the community, if you subtract the community benefits portion, which we did because we think it's warranted. The FY18 pilot amount is $235,996. Now, I'd like to add, with respect to Beth Israel, they thought it was important to point out that they do own taxable property, and these are medical offices on their campus and down in Lower Mills, and the payment of taxes on that property is approximately $280,000 a year. It was described to us as a pass-through, so I think these are most of them are condos, and I think that they have medical practices that are housed in those condos. It was described as a pass-through, and it seemed, and I'm not entirely clear what that meant, but my thought was that that meant that the occupants pay the taxes or the amount for the taxes to the hospital, and the hospital remits that $280,000 to the town. And so the pilot amount, again, the full pilot amount without a 5-year phase-in is $235,996. The next slide just is to point out one thing that we pointed out to the hospital is that it is not uncommon for medical institutions to pay cash for pilot. Indeed, Beth Israel's parent pays 100% of Boston's requested payment. They pay $3.17 million to Boston. Boston Medical Center pays $519,000. Mass Ioneer pays $405,000. So it is not uncommon for medical institutions to pay pilot. It is more of a challenge for community hospitals, I think it's fair to say, to make pilot payments, but again, it is not uncommon. Given the fact that we do not currently have an agreement for a 5-year phase-in with Beth Israel Hospital Milton, the recommendation of the pilot committee is to issue a pilot request in the amount of $235,996, which is the amount, the FY18 pilot amount. That is Beth Israel Deacon's Hospital, Milton. Moving on to Curry College. Again, just running through the same facts that we put forward with respect to Beth Israel Deaconess. This is from the 2015 IRS form, IRS 990 form, $113 million in revenue, revenue less expenses of about $5.5 million, and net assets of $130 million. The next slide shows the calculation of the pilot amount. Value of the property of Curry College is $137 million. If taxable, that would be nearly $3 million in taxes. If you take 25% of that, as required by the policy, that's $744,000. If you cut the community benefits out to 50%, which we did, that takes it down half of it, which is $372,000. The parentheses means it's a subtraction. And then if you subtract the amount of Curry's payment in August of this year for pilot under the 2005 Memorandum of Understanding, you subtract that $86,000, you come up with an FY18 pilot amount of $285,701. If you spread that amount over 5 years, again, it would be about, I think, $52,000 or $53,000, whatever the first slide showed, per year increase. The next slide, again, similar with the medical institutions, it is not uncommon for higher education institutions to pay pilot amounts. Tufts University pays Boston $570,000. UMass Lowell has just agreed to pay a significant amount of pilot payments to Lowell over the next 20 years. So based on that, based on the fact that we don't have an agreement with Curry under the new policy, the recommendation of the committee is to issue a pilot request in the amount of $285,701, which is the FY18 pilot amount. And finally, Milton Academy, again, the same analysis in context for, if we talk about the usage of the property, total revenues in 2015, which is the last year that we have information on, that is public, $76 million in revenue less expenses of $6.3 million, and net assets of $283 million. And then if we take you through the same calculation of the pilot amount, the taxable value of the property is $140,000. If fully taxable, this would be approximately...
140 million. 140
Did I say-
million.
what did I say?
Yeah, it's 140 million.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Missed the 3 zeros. Let me take a sip of water and get back on track. All right. Not bad, this many pages and no mistakes yet, so see how we do to the end. Taxable value of the property, $140 million. If fully taxable, that would be approximately $3 million in tax payments, less the community benefit of $380,000, almost $381,000, for an FY18 pilot amount of effectively $381,000. Again, if that was spread over 5 years, we would start this year with a payment of $76,000, but we were unable to reach an agreement on that. The next slide, again, similar to the other institution, shows that other private schools have paid pilot. It's not, I don't know if I would say that it's common or uncommon. It's done. There are schools that do pay pilot, and we're aware of that. In 2015, Phillips Academy agreed to pay the town of Andover more than $3 million in pilot over the next 8 years, which includes about $380,000 to the town of Andover this year. And so the recommendation of this committee, given that there has not been an agreement on a 5-year phase-in or any agreement on a payment, the recommendation of the committee, is to issue Milton Academy a pilot request in the amount of $380,955, which is the FY18 pilot amount. And now I'll take a breath.
That was you were like an auctioneer.
Can I make one point, David? Mike has been using the word nonprofit, and we assume that the nonprofits in town, all of them don't pay. But outside of NSTAR, which is the largest taxpayer in town because they own all the poles and the wires going over the streets, the largest taxpayer is Fuller Village. Fuller Village is a nonprofit. They fully pay their taxes. Copeland Foundation owns property. They fully pay their taxes. And we mentioned community benefits, which I agree, Curry and Milton Academy and Beth Israel Deaconess, Milton, they do have community benefits. But Copeland, Fuller Village, and a lot of other institutions in town, I mean, even the landscapers that do gratis work for the town for landscaping. I know my neighbor does for the fire station. There's a lot of people who do community benefits, and they're still paying their taxes. So I just think we want to look at this and say, you know, what's fair is fair, and bring this to that sort of state.
I think those are good points, and you know, this committee's worked really hard, and I think that it's working hard because we do understand that the taxpayers in this town bear a burden because of our residential tax base. And so we felt it was incumbent upon ourselves to do this research and put this out there. I'm encouraged. You know, we want to be good partners. We're not looking to hurt anyone in particular. We're looking to be good partners. You know, we do have, as a town, we do have services that, you know, police, fire that respond to these nonprofits. You know, we have road work. You know, we have bills to pay, and you know, there are community benefits, yes, and a lot of these institutions do give to our town in various ways. But I also think that that we can also get to a place where you know, we can get a contribution to help the taxpayers. They use the services of our town on a consistent basis, and so I want to congratulate both you and Matt for going out and having great discussions. I'm encouraged that Milton Hospital and Curry are open to furthering the discussions. I was a little concerned to hear that Milton Academy doesn't have any interest right now at this point in time. I want to open up questions to the board. I do have a question myself, and that's related to a couple community benefits that I noticed at Milton Academy had noted. They had noted a hockey rink that they, ice time that they provide. One of the things that I had done research on is that I don't know how it's a community benefit when we have to pay over $200 an hour for ice time. So I don't know how our youth hockey program or anyone who wants to skate in town benefits from that. And then I just had a question. How many students from Milton Academy who live on non-taxable houses, do you happen to know in your former previous life as a member of the school committee how many attend Milton Public Schools?
That's one of the things we looked at in the presentation that we made to Milton Academy. We pointed out the fact that there are families who live on non-taxable property, so there's no property taxes that are paid on that property, and there are approximately somewhere in 30, 35 students, depending on the year. I'm not sure exactly what the number is currently, but it's something along the lines of 30 or 35, which if you look at the per pupil payment, it's approximately between $400,000 and $500,000. Now, having said that, one of the things that Milton Academy does point out is that they have, I believe it's 10 parcels. It's approximately 10 parcels of housing that is that they own, that they haven't sought an exemption for, and they pay approximately $100,000 in taxes for that property. That's not included in these amounts, but they do pay those amounts for the property for which they have not sought exemption. We don't know whether they could have an exemption. They seem to think they could, and they may well be able to, but they don't do it. They pay about $100,000 in taxes. So in your question, the amount, best information we have is about 30 or so students for about $400,000 to $500,000.
Okay, so it's about $400,000 that the taxpayers are incurring. When you look at it. Okay, if they're not going to school at Milton Academy. Okay. I'll just open it up for questions from the board if we have any.
Oh, I do, but I'll let Katie go first.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I may have one, but I wanted to hear your question.
So obviously we live in a much different world than Curry, Milton Academy, even the hospital was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And one of the things that your presentation doesn't cover is the realistic demand for services that go on, especially police and fire in this community. And be very upfront, very close to Ken Quigley, and I truly believe at some point you either have to be a part of this community or apart from this community. In the case of both Milton Academy, both Curry College and the hospital, they clearly try very hard to be a part of this community. The hospital has changed a great deal. The emergency room, if you go through there today compared to what it was 25, is a big city hospital emergency room. And even in my meeting with Rich Fernandez, they're looking to bring more. They want to bring more business there. They want to bring more outpatient. They want to bring more there. Mental health and opioid and EMS runs, there is no hospital in the city of Queens anymore. Anyone who lives on 28 or on East Main, you can count every day the number of ambulances that transgress our streets going to Milton Hospital. And with that comes a demand. I believe in Chief King's response to Mr. Dennehy when he was doing a breakdown on calls for service. I think it was the hospitals who Chief King replied back, it was too many to count. There was so many responses. But that's just part of how life is today. Curry is a much bigger campus. There's Roxanne, she's gone, can attest to us in a butter. It's a busy, busy place. And I don't think anyone realizes that more than Ken Quigley, and in that case, he has been a big time, more contributor than anyone else. The Academy, people don't realize, and I've said this publicly very often here, we may not have a social plaza, we may not have a big mall, but we have a lot of schools of education, both public and private. If you take the combined population of all of our public and private schools in the town of Milton, it's over 11,000 kids. That's a lot of kids in this town every day. From the police alone, Milton Academy draws a great deal. They've done so much for a private school, of all of them. Fontbonne very rarely asks for anything. Curry doesn't ask for much. Milton Academy's gotten a lot of attention and a lot of resources from this town for free. To be honest, I was a little offended in the letter that came to Mr. Denny and to you about their contributions, because when I looked at it from an insider perspective, particularly from a public safety, it's been the complete opposite. The town has done so much to help them train, prepare. Mutual aid is part of working in the arena of public service today, public works, whatever it is, it's giving and taking. This town gives a great deal, and so I will say this to you. This has been a learning experience for all of us, but I've watched this closely, and I don't think that I think you've been more than reasonable with each of them. I do think and I don't use the word offended very often, but I was rather offended the fact that they came back to it. They felt that what they were doing was just as the chair said, they're renting hockey space at a greater rate than the Yulin Rake is. So it's not like a benefit to the town. I mean, they use the photos of Special Olympics. They should be honored to have Special Olympics there. That's a statewide thing for special needs kids. They shouldn't be just giving back to this. That gives to kids from all over the state. And I really was upset. And I've said this before, you either are part of this community or you're not. And if you're a part of this community and you draw resources the way these three institutions do, I think it's more than reasonable from the pay their shift. Over 5 years, there will be $886,380 this town. How many things could we pay for with that kind of money? It's a lot. And I think that the fact that you gave them all the 50% right up front, I think is very reasonable. I really do. I know this was not easy for you guys to do this, and I really give you a lot of credit for doing it, and I ask you to stick with it, and hopefully we can work this out. It's not an easy topic, but I think it's something. We all stood out on street corners about 4 months ago holding override signs. I think it's incumbent upon us as the leaders of this town, if there's a way that we can alleviate the tax burden on everyone who lives here, then we have to do that. And I think this is one way that we should do it. Because the services more than exceed the reasonableness of your request, I think. That's all. Thank you. Okay.
I had a question for you, Mike and Jim, on the hospital. And full disclosure, I served on the hospital board for 7 years, so so I do have that background. I don't think it's a prejudice or a bias, but a background. Does the taxable value of the property, were you including the medical office building in that, or you're not? So these numbers exclude the property that's paying the $280,000. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. I think we should take these recommendations under advisement tonight. I'm grateful for all the work the committee has done. I'm not, as one member of the board, I'm not prepared to vote on them tonight. I think we need to give them some consideration. But, and to some extent, we're kind of grouping them together here tonight by talking about them together, and they are the three largest, but there's also considerable differences, and I think you almost started pointing some of that out, Richard. So, despite having been on the board, I knew that the medical office building paid taxes. I didn't realize it was $280,000, which is a pretty significant amount. So that's something I think needs to be considered when we decide what we're going to do with these recommendations, in particular for that one. And there may be other particular factors for each of the institutions that we might want to bring into what our thoughts are on these recommendations.
If I may, Katie, to that point, each of the nonprofits made arguments and pointed out facts about their contributions to the community and the different ways that they help and they pay, and we certainly invited them to our meetings and to this meeting tonight to lay that out. We can certainly lay that out as best we can, but again, we thought that in order to try to get a win-win, the best way was to really just take that off the table, assume it, and get moving on, at least a small level of payments, right? Get an agreement, and then work on and try to publicize all the wonderful things they do for that community benefit. So what we were trying to achieve was a win-win, and we're still hopeful that it will happen. And I have to say, Milton Academy they were very gracious, and they did say that they didn't think an agreement was warranted at this time. Hopefully the door isn't closed. One thing to think about is, I think, the fiscal year of each of them. As I said, Curry's fiscal year begins June 1. I believe Milton Academy's fiscal year begins July 1, and the hospitals, so those were both, to be fair, those were both after those were both, before we started meeting with them. But again, that was the idea of the phase-in. it's a small amount given their entire budget, so you phase it in over time. So that was the idea of the phase-in. And I think the hospital's fiscal year begins October 1st, so that was after we had met with them. And so, but just, you might keep that, those are the facts you might keep in mind.
Yeah, although their budgeting, of course, goes, as the town's does, starts many months before that. So I'd probably, for all of them, I think they're probably all in that same.
I just have a fault to Katie's. Do they pay on the Normandy property on the other side of, on the 10 acres thing on
Yes.
the Highlands? Do they pay on that?
Yes, that's included within the 280. Yeah.
But I take it if they develop that, though, that would then become part of their...
Yeah, and again, it was described to us as a pass-through, and again, and I think that the medical practices in there are for-profits that
Right.
pay the tax to the hospital, and the hospital remits it to the town.
Yeah, I think it's important that they are, especially in a community hospital context, you can't have an acute care community hospital without an active, large group of primary care physicians and some specialists, and vice versa. So they do go hand in hand, and
They want to build on that. You're right. They want to build on it.
They've made a lot of advances in recent years. During my years on the hospital board, we had some very tough financial years. So, these numbers on the 990s can vary from year to year, especially, I think, for a business like the hospital, which is an operating company. I think the colleges and the academy probably a little bit easier to be a little bit more consistent with their numbers, because the enrollment numbers, I don't think, change very much over time, whereas the hospital has some other factors to take into account. But thank you very much for all of your work, and I'm glad that the three institutions were all willing to talk, and it sounds like you had some good discussions, and I think it might be worth continuing some of those discussions and then deciding what to do about the recommendations.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that these are tough discussions to have, and I think that the goal that we all had in this committee was becoming stronger partners, and accentuating all the good that does happen, while also satisfying the need. We've heard from many residents over the last few years the need to adopt this policy to provide some relief. So I think it was very well said by Selectman Wells on why this needs to happen. And I think that, so what we'll do is we'll take it under advisement. And what I'd like to do is, now that we've had the presentation, digest this and vote on it at our next meeting.
One thing I would point out that I neglected to mention is that number that the committee came up with, that we recommended, that is a compromise figure in itself. Because of, again, that number gives them full benefit for the community benefit. That's usually something that's part of an agreement.
Right.
But we thought that it was...
You offered it up completely.
We thought it was to be accommodating and to be considerate of the contributions, to give them that benefit. So I think it's fair to say that the committee sees those numbers as really a compromise in themselves.
Sure. I agree.
Am I correct, you guys voted 5-0 today to move this forward to us tonight?
Correct. We did, and so the recommendation that Selectman Conley had was to let this digest. We just got this presentation now in front of us. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to put it onto the agenda for the next meeting to vote on it as a board.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And I know I was lying, I thank you for that, but I think people need to understand that there's a need in services that they don't really understand how much this town provides to these large institutions on a daily basis, and it is pretty significant.
Yeah, very well done. We appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jim.
Great night. Next item on our agenda is a conference with the Shade Tree Advisory Committee. Gene Powers and other members of the Shade Tree Advisory Committee coming in to give us an update on the committee's progress. Good evening.
It's going to be our toughest part of tonight.
You'll be surprised.
Bring your chair. You coming up here too? Just bring your chair.
If you wouldn't all mind just introducing yourself so the people at home could get an understanding of who you are, because you guys are doing great work. You've already been planting trees, and it's great to see.
I'm Nancy Chisholm.
I'm Fred Taylor.
I'm Kristen Kleiman, Otis Street.
Thank you for coming.
So the Shade Tree Committee's been meeting for roughly 2 years, and this summer we took it upon the committee to conduct an inventory of all residential streets that was last done 10 years ago in 2007. The reasons for the inventory were to assess the extent of the tree depletion over the last 10 years, to identify the areas of greatest concern within the community, and then to evaluate the tree species and to see if we can make recommendations how to replace those trees and what are the best trees going forward. As we went through this process, we had some very productive conversations. I want to thank Mr. Dennehy and his colleague, Mr. Berkeley, for their support as we went through this. It was very inspiring for us and left us very enthusiastic. We've already seen some significant movement going forward. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Fred Taylor.
Okay. So what we did this summer was a complete re-inventory of all the town street trees, that is, all the trees between the sidewalk and the street on all the residential streets in town. There's over 6,000 trees. It would be a huge job and an impossible job if we were doing it from scratch, but the fact is, as Nancy said, there was an inventory in 2007 that was done by a professional tree company, and they actually mapped out all the tree sites, their GPS location, what was there at the time, and they also mapped out vacancies along the streets because, it wasn't the Garden of Eden back then. There was already a significant loss of trees. So that helped a lot because all this information was available that could go into the town's GIS system, and it also provides us a baseline so we can compare 10 years later what has happened. And the other thing I wanted to make sure you understood was the other thing that made this really possible was we had great help from Alan Bishop at the DPW. He's the GIS specialist. He was able to port in all this information from the 2007 inventory into the GIS. He also was able to create an app for us that we could run on tablets on the street, and it had 20 questions, but they were all sort of multiple choice, and it had all the data from 2007. So the essential thing we were looking at really was we go to a tree site, we open up the data, and we can say, is the tree still there that was there in 2007? Is the tree been taken down? And if it was taken down, has it been replaced? And that's essentially the kind of data that we needed to know how bad the problem was and what it might take to fix it. So, where are we there?
The recap.
We can go to slide 5. I don't know who's controlling this. Okay, this is the numbers then.
I have it here, Fred. Yep.
So there, as I said, there were over 6,000 tree sites from the 2007 inventory. At that time, there was about 700 vacancies that they recognized as gaps in the tree canopy, and about 11% vacancy rate. Now, 10 years later, there's 1,820 vacancies. So now we're up to 29% vacancy rate in town. And I would point out, as that last bullet point says, that we're basically losing about 1.8% of the trees every year. So if we don't do anything and we let this go for another 10 years, we will have lost almost 50% of the trees in town. So the question is, how can we get at this and solve this problem? The next slide is a map that Alan made for us. It's hard to see, of course. It's up there. I've got a bigger version here, but the green dots are the live trees. The red dots are the dead trees or the stumps or the vacancies. It's just to show you that it's all over town, that it's happening. Some streets were hit a lot harder than others. And we're using this kind of a map to try to prioritize. So we already prioritized this year the main thoroughfares, Brook Road and Edge Hill and whatever. And then I think in years going forward, we will try to find those streets that have become sort of deserts at this point where they've lost almost all their trees.
And Fred, if I could add one thing here.
Sure.
So that this is the work that Alan did, but Fred had put this together as a poster. We placed this at the Milton's Citizen Celebrate Milton, thank you. And it
Seats in
was
there. Oh, yeah.
really exciting for us how many folks stopped over at the table and said, where's my street? Right? And everyone had a story to tell, and sadly, most
Cut
of the
my
time it
finger.
wasn't positive because there's a couple of red
Staple
marks
through
in
my
the
finger.
street. So it's information, being able to collect this data and put it out and engage folks, I think that really further emphasizes how important the community feels this is.
Okay, so on the next slide, this is actually now looking at it from a annual basis. So as far as we know, the town really hasn't made a big effort over the last 10 years. So we're sort of assuming we can just divide by 10 and think about this annually. So that means that on average, the town is taking down 137 trees a year, but only planting 25 on average over the last 10 years. So that's 112 trees down every year. Now, when we think about this then and trying simply to stop the attrition, that means we have to find a way to plant 137 trees every year, not just 25. And if we wanted to actually restore the canopy, even just talking about restoring it back to what it was in 2007, and we want to do that, I'm just looking at this on a 10-year basis because we got a lot of deficit to make up. That's another 112 trees every year for the next 10 years, so that's 250 trees a year. Now this year, a big effort is being made with some money that was available to try to plant some trees, but even this year, I think it's very difficult to get even near to 137. Michael can talk about that a little more, but it's going to take some real effort, and of course that's why we're here, hoping that the selectmen are willing to kind of help drive this, along with the warrant committee and whoever else needs to be informed about this, to try to get the money available to at least stop the attrition and hopefully, back things up a bit. I think the next slide, I just have a couple more.
I just ask one question.
Sure.
You see 137 trees taken out. Is this, cumulative, like the utilities, us, it's just car accidents, what, just,
Yeah,
it's a cumulative 137 years?
I don't know that the DPW has really good records of what they've taken down. We're hoping now that we have a database, we'll figure that out, but we know it's the DPW, probably at least 100.
Right.
Eversource takes things down, and I guess they're telling the DPW, but...
Well, they come every year. They do. They come every year, and they work the streets.
Well, they do take trees down, but I don't know how much, whether it's going to get into our database is what I'm hoping. And then, and we found in just talking to people, because we met a lot of people on the street, that some homeowners take it on themselves. A tree looks bad, and they don't even go to the DPW. And some people plant trees without telling the DPW. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and we hope to get a better grip on this now that we have a database to start with. So we also, I don't want to talk much about this, but this gave us a view of the tree species in town, and we want to diversify so that we don't end up with like Elm City and then have all the elms die the next time a disease comes through. Half the trees in town are maples, so we're hoping to get away from maples with the new plan.
They're Norway maples.
Well, half of the maples are Norway maples, yes.
Which is an invasive species, which is no longer sold in Massachusetts and is leaf wooded. So we don't want those anymore.
So you're not buying those anymore?
No, nor the Bradford pears. I think it's worth saying that a lot of people plant Bradford pears because they're a beautiful tree, and you see them in parking lots, and they flower, and they keep their leaves very late. They are very weak wooded, and if you looked around at that windstorm and you knew what tree that was, most of the branches that came down were from Bradford pears. So we are moving away from that. That's a non-native species, and going with solid species that will survive in this climate.
Good. And I would say the Norway it's not allowed to be planted anymore. The state has mandated that you can't plant it. So it's not supposed to be sold by nurseries. It was obviously extremely popular some years ago. Okay, so on the last slide then is sort of our plea, I guess, that for people to treasure the trees on the street. There's, on the top bullet point is all the benefits, or at least most of the benefits, I think, that I think everybody really understands, and I'm not going to go through that here, but we're hoping that people see this as a really important part of the town's infrastructure. It's certainly the most visible part of the town's infrastructure, and the beauty that it gives and the benefits of the shade and the cooling. And it's the one part of the infrastructure where you can buy a little tree for $100 or whatever, and if you water it, the infrastructure grows. It actually increases in value if you're willing to take care of it. So we're hoping to get support on this.
There are two other points that I think for the Shade Tree Committee are important in how it relates to other issues in town. One is traffic. It is proven that trees reduce traffic. Okay, they slow traffic. They don't reduce it. They slow traffic. The shade created on the pavement makes people slow down. They can't see as well. So that helps. The second one is the air pollution with respect to the planes. It has been proven that the tree canopy does absorb the particulate matter that comes down from airplanes. So it's not just property values, which are important to all of us, and it's not just beautification, but it's also the fact that it can slow traffic and it can grab some of that particulate matter that's in the air currently falling from the plane. So it's really critical, and we're very passionate about it, and I think we should also acknowledge that the man who did almost all of the inventory and walked every street in this town is Fred.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I enjoy it every minute of it, so I'm not complaining.
I don't think you can overstate that enough. To do that during the summer months and the humidity was really a labor of love for the town, Fred.
We're very fortunate to have passionate volunteers like you guys, and obviously this board is very committed to supporting all the work and the good work that you've done. We do realize the benefits. We will be working hard on your behalf. I want to congratulate, too, our town administrator and Chase Berkeley, our DPW director, for their efforts in supporting as well, because I think it takes people on the inside and the operations side to understand the significance, too, to be able to do it right. I want to speak, on behalf of the board to say that, yes, we are committed. We will be with you. We understand the significance, and we will be lobbying for as much as we can, because those are drastic numbers.
I think we should really target some free cash over the next few years towards trees for some of this replacement. That would definitely be appropriate for that type of one-time monies to help with this 250 trees.
We need to catch up. We've got to find a way to catch up. The great work that you've done, it would be all lost if we didn't find a way, when we have such committed volunteers that we do right now, and the significance is great, so.
The committee's work is so important. I think they really, working with the DPW, have really turned things around, because this has been a problem with DPW over the last few years that we just weren't, we were asking for. We were telling DPW we want the trees to be planted, and it really wasn't happening, and there were trees being removed, but the money in the budget really wasn't being used.
I think the communication has been great, and I think
I do too.
That was one of the points I wanted to make sure that people at home knew that Chase Berkeley, who's our DPW director, and his staff, it's not just Chase, it's the people on the streets, so they're working hard every day. Every employee are committed to doing a great job to serve this town.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think the DPW and the town administrator and the Shade Tree Committee really deserve a lot of the credit for turning this around. So thank you for all your important work.
Don't leave yet. Do we have a line item for tree purchases?
We do. So this year, we're identifying two different line items. We're town accountant, and we're meeting with DPW tomorrow, actually, to go over their capital requests, which we're going to present to the Capital Improvement Committee Wednesday morning, and their budget, which is due Friday. We're going to separate and identify tree plantings as a line item, which we haven't had in the past. We have a forestry line, which is more pruning and stuff like that. But yeah, there's been a lot of work done in the last week. We hired a contractor. I want to thank Town Tree for their work. We managed to plant 3 times as many trees in a week as we did in a previous year. So the attrition, it's real. It's something that we have to attain, and I think to Ms. Conlon's point, that free cash or one-time items that we can use to make sure that that's an investment going forward is something that we will prioritize and bring to this board. So, and I can't thank this group enough for them. Very, very easy to deal with.
I saw, only because I mentioned this too, so a resident recently contacted me. He's putting an addition on his house, and he chose from the list. He put 2 trees, planted them in front. I actually went and looked at it today on Lyman Road. So there's also projects where people might be doing something to their house, and you have them either add or plant new trees as part of what they're doing? Is that something that they do on their own, or is?
So there's two different things. I believe that resident did something on their own. There is a gift program where you can go out and buy a tree, and the Public Works group will plant that for you. They just ask that you go on the website. It's a more robust website, too. Part of the back and forth with the Shade Tree Advisory Committee was that the webpage, the link to trees wasn't very dynamic. Now you can click on a couple of links, request a tree, see what type of tree you should or should not, obviously you don't want the Norway, and then Public Works will go out with you and find out what tree works there, if there's wires or any type of impediment. But it's a much more back and forth list, and we've hit Reedsdale, we've hit Thatcher, we've hit Edge Hill, all the priorities that they gave us, and their work on the street has made it a lot easier for Public Works to achieve that. So, thanks again.
Before they find residents leave, can we jump to item 17 and reappoint them while it's on our agenda tonight?
Absolutely. Yep. So we do have a motion before us. We also have two new applicants whose information has been forwarded to us, to Barbara Martin. So anyway, we do have a motion before us to appoint the Shade Tree Advisory Committee.
Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we appoint Gene H. Powers of 13772 Brush Hill Road. I think, and that's a typo. Is it 1372? Like, wow.
Yeah, that's a
It really grew. I know there's a lot of expansion. Frederick Taylor of 98 Gulliver Street, Kristen Kleiman of 99 Otis Street, Nancy Chisholm of 129 Gulliver Street, Carol Stark of 291 Hillside Street, Branch Lane of 85 Highland Street, and his two new members, Christine Paxia of 1027 Brush Hill Road and Laura Beebe of 1514 Canton Avenue, to the Shade Tree Advisory Committee to serve for the rest of their lives. No, I'm sorry, to serve through November of 2018.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to mention, I happened to run into Peggy Chow yesterday, former chair who just stepped down, created one of these vacancies, and had a conversation with her about all the work that she's doing. And I know she's still very interested, and she said she'll still be there for the committee.
Right.
And so I just want to thank both Peggy and Tucker Smith who stepped down for all the work they did.
Yeah, so our goal was to plant a tree in front of Peggy's house first, because she was such a strong advocate for the Shade Tree Advisory Committee. When we got there was already a tree there. So she snuck it in.
Probably did.
So.
People do it themselves, we discovered.
Yeah. Okay, so any more discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Yep.
it.
Thanks, Nancy. Yep.
Okay, item number 9, we have a conference with the Blue Hill Ski Area. We have Vero, General Manager of Blue Hill Ski. Vero is going to give us a little update of the upcoming winter season. Good evening, Vero.
Good evening, how are you?
How are you?
Good. I just wanted to make sure that you have the right information on the handouts that you have. I think there is actually a typo on it. And actually, if you look at the unlimited season pass, our lowest offering price on that was $289, so that the savings is $100 on that. So basically what this is showing is the junior program that we run for children's ages 7 to 15. It's a program that's opened up. We run it with other town recreation groups. We run it with the town of Milton, and it's also opened up to the public. When it's opened up to the public, it is a heavily discounted program that we put on for the children. It's something that the state has always asked us to do, is to get children participating in winter sports. So we have this heavily discounted program. And then we take this program, same exact program, and we hand it off to the rec departments and give them an additional discount on that so that they can help defray their cost on marketing that to other towns. This year, for the town of Milton, they came and asked us for an earlier time slot. And what we were able to do for the town of Milton this year is we instituted an 8 a.m. start. Normally that start would be later in the morning, so they wanted that early morning slot. It's a coveted spot for us because that's when most of our customers come in. But we offered that and we gave that to the town of Milton. So they'll have Saturdays at 8 a.m. Then they will have a 11 o'clock lesson and then a 12:30 lesson that residents can choose from. So they've got, the town of Milton residents have the discounted program, and then any of the children that are participating in that program can get an unlimited season pass, which we sold last spring for $289 for anybody who bought it earlier. We're offering it to town residents who take the program for $179. So it's an additional $100 off. That pass right now sells to the public for $349. So again, it's a significant savings for the children who participate in the program in Milton.
So question for you, Vero, and thank you for providing us the program pricing. When I look at the Milton recreation price for the youth in our town, is this price any different than the price that's given to Canton, Norwood, Westwood, anyone else? Is there a difference, or is it the same price?
It's the same price on Saturdays and Sundays. We only have 2 other programs that come in on the weekends. All of our other programs come during the midweek when there's a lot less demand for the program, so we can fit them in there. We run probably close to 800 children through this junior program, so fitting them in, we have to fit them in wherever we can. So we're trying to incentivize them, and it's only a few dollars, the difference to go midweek versus weekend. But just a few dollars has gotten rec groups to go midweek.
Okay, so I just trying to just be clear. So the Milton price is no different, though we, and we value, the ski slope as a
Well,
great.
the season pass is not offered to any other towns.
Not offered, okay.
And the 8 a.m. time slot is not offered to anybody.
But the lesson's only the $99.
Right.
That's the same. Milton rec price is the same as, say, Westwood rec price, Canton rec price. Same thing with the lessons with the lift.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Just to put that lesson in perspective, the $99 price, our customer who walks in off the street and gets that same lesson is paying $42 for one lesson. That's $99 for 5 lessons. So when you do the math, it's a considerable discount that we're offering.
Okay. And our Parks Department was agreeable. They didn't have any further requests in terms of programming to you?
We had actually met, and when we had met, they had asked for the 8 a.m., they'd asked for the unlimited season pass, which we gave them.
Okay.
And then we had told them that we were not raising prices from last year for this year. So these are the same prices that they had last year.
Any comments from the board?
I have none.
Well, my daughter skis there, man. She loves it, so I've never put a ski on in my life, but she loves it.
My kids are doing it as well. And I just ask those questions because, you are a part of our community, and I, we look to, we hope that you continue to be a good partner with our youth groups because there is a lot of benefit, to our families. They get to get access,
Right.
And it's our job to lobby for it. So
I don't blame you.
So.
Additionally, we also do the high school racing program, so Milton High School races at our program, and they have a discounted racing pass that they use. So
we really enjoy the ski slope here in our town. I know that our residents do, and we take a lot of pride in it. And the reservation as a whole is a great place for many families. So.
I actually thought of a question based on something, and it hasn't been discussed recently, but there was talk a long time ago about moving the concession stand, or either replacing it, putting in a new one, or moving it to the Milton side. And I know there was a question
We did talk about that over a year ago when we had you come in, and one of the things that you had mentioned that, one of the benefits to Milton would be that you were going to move the lodge from where it is currently over towards.
Right, and that's all based on the 30-year lease that the state wants to put out for the property. Right now, we operate under 5-year permits, so
Sure.
We're putting money into the ski area, but you have to be very careful on how much money you're going to put in on 5 years. 30 years is a big difference, and when that lease comes out, the state is going to require in that 30-year lease that the lodge needs to be replaced, and that's the ski area right now, as you're looking at a 1960 ski area that's operating in 2017. The lodge doesn't belong where it is now. It needs to move to a better location. And so the idea, if that does move, it would be, the most ideal spot is in the Milton side.
Great.
Just one more thing. So I was in on the meeting. It was very good dialogue that we had with the Parks Department that day. I appreciate
Thank you.
both of these coming in. The only thing I was missing was the Sunday hours, right? I know it was discussed to try to pair the...
We had discussed Sunday hours, but we also have a race league that comes in on Sunday mornings, and they bring about 300 kids, and we close our main trail for racing. So if we did the 8 a.m. class on Sundays, 3 out of the 5 days, the intermediate and advanced kids wouldn't have the main trail to
All right.
ski on.
So I missed that piece of it. So Saturdays is 8 a.m.,
Yes.
right?
And we offered a considerable, I think we offered 60 spots.
Even more, actually.
Actually, even more.
And the Sundays was what, 11:30 and...
11 to 12:30.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the idea with the Parks and Rec is the Milton people like to get in before the parking lot's full. They appreciate that 8 o'clock hour, and they were going to try to accommodate that.
So they had asked, they said they wanted to get it up to 200 participants this year, and I think we gave the spots that we allotted are close to 300. So you have a lot of variety that your residents can pick from in order to get the lesson they want.
Great.
Not many communities have this option available to them, so this is a great
Very
benefit.
fortunate, yeah.
And the support that the skiers receive from Milton has been wonderful, so we do appreciate it as well.
We appreciate the partnership and wish you the best and hope it's a snowy year.
Oh, I do too.
Maybe this weekend.
No, it's too soon, too soon.
You never know.
Thank you, Vero.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Bye-bye.
Okay, item number 10 is a discussion related to Esprit de Vin. We have Attorney Ned Corcoran has requested to attend our meeting to introduce the buyer who is going to be purchasing Esprit de Vin. Oh, hi, Keith. Hey, guys. Good evening.
Keith, how are you?
Esprit de Vin.
Yeah.
So I actually have, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I actually have Keith Mills with me, Matt Solomon, who is attorney for the buyer, and Michael Riolas, who is, everything's now been signed up, so it's public. And the buyer is going to be coming before you soon with an application for a new liquor license for the Esprit de Vin location. But I just thought it would be nice to spend 5 minutes. I know Keith wants to publicly thank the town for all of the support and introduce Michael and give you a chance to say hello before he comes before you more formally in a hearing. So,
Thank you. Well, welcome, Keith, and
thank you.
thank you.
And Linda's here as well. Oh, okay.
I moved on.
Good evening.
It's hard to believe it's been 16 years that we've done it, and it's been great. The town has been really supportive. It's funny because a lot of times people say, isn't it hard doing business in Milton? It doesn't seem to be business friendly, but I would say it's not. I mean, everybody wants to make sure everything runs right. Everybody wants the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and nothing wrong with that. Always been treated fairly. You guys have always been really good to me. I remember when we first were coming in front of Jimmy Mullen pulled me aside and saying, I don't know about that, Keith, but, if you want to try it, then we'll be behind it. And, and again, I can't thank you all in the town enough for being here for us. I think our next venture is that we're off to France, aren't we?
Eventually, yes.
Actually, that was a good answer.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've known Michael for almost 15 years. Our families have been pretty good friends, and he's certainly probably more qualified than I ever was to open up a store. Probably knows more about wine than I'll ever know about wine. But
You've done all right for yourself.
I'm okay. But it was one of those things that we've been talking about doing this and talking about doing it, but it was more talk than anything. And then all of a sudden, all the pieces kind of fell in place, and the landlord was on board with it. And we couldn't think of it going to anybody other than Michael, just because he's been such a good friend, and he's a wine geek like we are. And I know he'll kind of keep it in the same way we did it. all his way, but, but we had talked, and we thought, instead of you guys just getting kind of a cold petition in the mail and everything about what's going on, Lynn and I thought it was really important, for for us to come up and introduce them. And again, I mean, we really can't thank you enough. I mean, we've been really part of the fabric of the town because of what the town has done for us.
We certainly have, and I think that you've been a staple. A lot of people, we look forward to seeing, whether it be a Thursday or a Friday as they headed into the weekend. And you're a business that was certainly, well run and appreciated by many of the folks in the town. So while obviously sad to go, I'm sure it's exciting for your new venture. And obviously it's a good opportunity for us now to meet the new owners. So maybe if you could just introduce yourselves to us, that would be great, and tell us just a bit about your background. I know we'll be seeing you soon at a future meeting, but.
So as Keith mentioned, he and I have known each other for 15 years. I've worked in the industry for 26 years now. I worked in sales for a long time, and Keith and I, as you mentioned, we became friends, and I ended up taking an operation job where I work now, but with the request that I'm allowed to keep one customer, and that was Keith. And I appreciate everything he's done in the store, and I regularly pour in the store on Friday, so I see the presence that he has in the community, and I hope to have the opportunity to continue that legacy with the store.
Any questions from our board?
I'd just like to say a couple of things to Keith. Following up on what you said, David, Keith, you were also a very generous benefactor to the different organizations in town. Whenever there was a need for a raffle or a gift basket or anything, you always supported a lot of the local organizations. So I know the town's very grateful for that, and all the organizations you sponsored are very grateful for that. And I think also, I didn't realize it had been 16 years, but the Esprit of Inn opening up really helped revitalize that business district and bring about the next changes that happened in Central Avenue that were very positive. And I would have lost a bet a few years ago if I thought that you were going to sell before we'd have the Henry's building down. But
I would have taken that bet.
That's the way these things happen. But we're going to have good news on that front soon. But unfortunately, it's I know we talked about it a lot over the years. So unfortunately, it's going to happen probably after you moved on to France.
Closing won't happen until January, so we'll see.
Okay, so we'll see. So maybe.
TikTok. Closing here.
Yeah.
Can we get
Thank
the
you very much.
sledgehammers tomorrow, please?
And thank you to Linda as well.
I just want to say the same thing. It's almost 16 years ago when I met you, and I knew nothing about wine, and we met in the most unusual circumstances. Something very few people know was that I was in culinary school. My wife had enrolled me in culinary school, and I was in Cambridge Culinary College in my first semester. And my chef professor was from California, a gentleman by the name of Monty Jett. And when he found out I was from Milton, he said, well, I have a good friend who's just opened a wine shop. And that was how we became friends, and you taught me so many things about wine, and you were a vibrant part of that community. I mean, I went to work in that gas station when I was 15 years old across the street, and I worked there, and then went next door to Fallon, and then here to the police force. So Central Ave has been, my dad worked in the police station right there. So it is hard to believe you're leaving. When I saw this, I wrote to Michael, I'm like, what? So we do thank you. I think that,
I think without question, you were part of positive change, and I think that you should know that the residents of the town really appreciated what you brought to that Central Ave business district, and you're going to be missed.
Thank you very much.
But at the same point in time, we know that it's going to be in good hands because you've signed off on it. So,
Well, for the next 6 weeks or so, you can count on us, whatever you need, and we'll be there slinging cheese and wine and everything else.
Good. Well, let's hope they give you all a good send-off. But thank you again for all coming in tonight and taking this opportunity, because we too truly appreciate what you've done for our town.
Our pleasure.
Didn't you follow Starlight Cleaners, correct?
Pardon me?
You followed, it was Starlight Cleaners, what was it in there?
Yeah.
in Central Ave Deli was the plate next door.
Yeah.
You made it quite a place from what it was.
I remember when we first moved in, everybody said, I don't get it, but we knew that was the area, and it is the area, in my humble opinion.
You helped make it that way, the two of you. You should be very proud of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We wish you the
Shoes to
best.
fill.
Okay.
And we look forward to seeing you through the holidays.
You sure will.
Michael, nice to meet you.
Yep. Good luck, Michael. Good luck.
Okay, item number 11 is discussion on the Falcone project in East Milton Square. We have Attorney Ned Corcoran here, who's requested to attend our meeting to discuss the proposed project by the Falcone companies.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm joined by Cole Irwin, who's part of the team, and Bob Falcone, who is the principal in the Falcone companies. So to report on what we've done and to request this board help us continue to move the process forward. So since we've last been before this board, I know that some of you have been at two of the larger presentations we had with the East Milton Neighborhood Association. We've been before the planning board. And since the last presentation, our architect and the Falcones have worked on scaling the project back. We've added some parking, and so we've got some new slides and some new renderings to show. And I think I can run sort of quickly through that, and then we open it up to you for questions. So how do we advance that? There we go. So here's East Milton. That's a familiar slide. That is the business district, most of it to the east of the expressway. Next. And that's the area that is owned by the Falcones. It's a small piece of the frontage on Adams Street, which is currently the Atlantic Insurance building. Behind it used to be a small one-family that was attached to the rear of Atlantic Insurance building. That's now been raised. It's no longer there. There's a two-family that fronts on Bassett Street, two one-families on Bassett Street, and as you come around the corner and up Franklin, you have the existing parking lot that serves the Falcone's existing building, their office building, and it provides parking under the permits for Novara at night. Next. So we've done a couple of things. One is we've adjusted the unit count and the parking count, and a little difficult to see completely from that perspective, but we showed in the past, to the right, you can see the underground parking area. There's now 84 spaces underground. I made a firm commitment to build all of the spaces under the existing parking lot at grade. They've taken away some spaces that are under the portion of the building that comes up to Adams Street itself. That's a very tight area. And the supportive excavation work associated with building in that area is really difficult. So they've taken those spaces away, but there's a net of 84 new spaces on the Bassett Street level. We've moved the entry in and out from Franklin Street to Bassett Street. They actually moved it, this pointer's not going to help us very well, but moved it to the, right there. And so it's diagonally sort of across. I'm not sure what the distance is, but across from the entry in and out of the fruit center. So which is further to the left. But the feeling was that location is a better location from a traffic perspective, that most of the traffic coming out will tend to turn left and get to Granite Avenue, and as it leaves the building, obviously as traffic comes to the building, it'll follow the general traffic patterns that people follow today to get in and out of the area. On the surface, we've gone to 41 spaces on the surface. So there's a total of 125 parking spaces. That's up from about 115, I think, that we were at some time ago. We have increased the amount of retail on the first floor to about 8,800 square feet, almost 8,900 square feet. We've taken 2 of the one-bedroom apartments that were on the first floor and converted that to additional retail space. Overall, we've reduced the number of apartment units from 71 proposed to 61. And next, most significantly, probably in the next slide, is what the treatment of the building as it faces over Bassett Street. So there was a set of 2-bedroom apartments that were stepped back from Bassett Street, but which had balconies essentially over the edge of Bassett. We've taken that row of apartments out and reduced the scale of the building on the 4th floor.
So now it's a 3-story building?
Now it's, at Bassett Street, it's 3 stories over the parking. The rest of the building is still 4 stories over the parking, but there's a whole sort of one side of that corridor is now been lowered to 3 stories. Next is the way the building was last rendered when we showed the Neighborhood Association. You can see the balconies at the top and then the 4th floor back. That's gone. We've also begun to change the look, and in the next slide, we've changed the look so that it's more of a gabled roof style where that 3rd floor is set within a roof line. Gives it less of a sense of mass. It feels like it's more part of the roof. It's intended to mirror a little bit the way that the upper floor was treated at Milton Hill House. The top floor is built within the gabled roof, and/or the mansard roof down at 36 Central. Again, that top floor is built within the roof level. Behind it, you can see, in this slide, you can just see that the roof of the 4th floor.
Right. On the far left, I can see it in the corner.
And if you go to the next slide, Mike, that's the prior look, again, with the flat roof and the new look.
This is from Franklin Street, right?
This is from Franklin Street, looking into the parking lot with a gabling effect over at least the portion of the building that surrounds the parking lot. The next slide it shows the latest version of how the building was being treated from Adams Street. We haven't begun to adjust that. We're looking for some input on how the building wants to meet the Adams Street side, which is, as you know, is retail and restaurants. And we haven't yet begun to render the Adams Court side either. And so some of that that work has to begin to happen. Next, the building is now turned, and there are a couple of slides that are slides that were prepared for us by Blair Hines, who is the landscape architect. And one of his goals was to turn the notion of the surface parking lot from simply a parking lot that abuts a building to a pedestrian experience with a parking lot in it. And so we've widened the sidewalks, particularly along the existing building to the south. Right now, there is no sidewalk that serves the Falcone's existing building. They just basically walk right in and off the parking lot. So we've widened that out. We've created a pedestrian seating area that meets the retail presence inside the building at the head of the parking lot, and some additional plantings and other treatments along the residential side. The next, Mike, it begins to show, and this was the prior rendering. We haven't updated the rendering from this perspective, but starting to think about the types of vegetation that we can install, particularly along the Bassett Street side and on the lower level of Franklin Street, with a couple of ideas. One is there are new forms of tall, skinny trees that can be planted, and they can survive in very narrow places, and they can be planted strategically as you move along the Bassett Street side. They'll grow quite tall, and they'll offset some of the massing of the building. The other is the planting of green screens, which is sort of, 1 story in height. You can create these steel framework that you then plant ivy in and things like that. It'll grow within it and give you sort of a green screen, and that can all sit outside between Bassett Street, and Franklin Street and the building itself. So it'll mask the brick appearance of the parking structure.
These pictures from Cambridge?
I don't know where they're different things that he's done.
Kendall Square, or Harvard Square?
So basically, the comparison since the last time we were here is that we've gone from 10,000 square feet of new retail to just under 9,000 square feet. We've gone from 8,800 square feet of new office to 7,700 square feet of new office. There's an existing, we have to account for 6,200 square feet of their existing office building, which remains. We've moved from 71 apartments with 97 bedrooms, 25% affordable, to 61 apartments with 82 bedrooms, 1 3-bedroom as opposed to 2 3s. And the proposal is that if there's a second 3 that's required, or even perhaps with this, if there's some further adjustment, that the Falcones own a 3-bedroom home off of Mechanic Street, which they would propose to convert to an affordable and make that available for one of the 3 units. We've gone from 117 parking spaces to 125. And then I started with sort of a rough parking count that tries to account for all of the needs for most of the time. So if we said we have 125 spaces, and there are 61 apartments with 82 bedrooms, we said other than the 1 3-bedroom, we'd account for 1 car per bedroom. So with the 3 bedrooms, likely that you'd have 2 cars. We wouldn't say that there would be 3, although there's room in this calculus for 3. So 1 car per bedroom. We don't think that's as many cars as you'll see. We think there'll be fewer, but we'll start with the notion that there's 1 car per bedroom. On the right-hand side, at night, you obviously need to park all 81 of those cars. And Novara needs to be accounted for. There's 36 cars that are expected to be able to park there. So that is a total of 117. And that there'll be some retail. We don't know yet what the retail will be or when it will operate, but to some degree in the evening, that retail may stay open to 6 or 7 or 8, so there needs to be some amount of those spaces that would be available as well. Now, all 81 spaces are unlikely to be full at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. People will filter home in the evening. And so if we say absolutely we need 124 spaces, we've got 125. It's probably some number that's not far off of that, but it's a reasonable scale. So we think that we park it at night and in the evenings appropriately. Daytime, assume 25% of the cars will stay home or be at home at some time during the day. You need access to 20 spaces. The new retail requires 36 under zoning. New office requires 31. The existing office requires 25. That creates a total of 112 spaces that are necessary and available during the day. Again, we have a net of 13 available. I did a slightly different calculation, and I did this today, so I'll just hand out for members of the board. This is based on the parking sharing that is within. This is based on parking sharing within the zoning overlay that was created for Wharf Street. where they, because it was going to be a mix of residential and other, there's a calculus that the planning board came up as part of that zoning as to when do you need certain volumes, percentages of your volumes overall. So weekday nights, you need all 81 for residential purposes. And they do 9 p.m. They break it down based on hours. So after 9 p.m., you would say you would need all 81 for weeknight perspective. It's possible you need some for Novara beyond 9 o'clock, although I think the square settles down fairly quickly. But there's a net available of 44 if we don't account for any for Novara after 9 o'clock. On weekdays between 8 and 5, they apply a 20% as opposed to 25% volume of residential. You apply 100% of the other retail and uses. Novara doesn't park until after 5, so there's no demand for Novara until 5. There's a total of need of 108. That leaves 17 available. Weekday evenings between 5 and 9. They say that 90% of the spaces must be available for residential. 20% must be available for retail, so that's a 7 number. And you need all 36 for Novara. That creates a need for 116 spaces. There's a net available of 9. Weekend days and weekend nights, similarly, there's a net available on weekend days of 4 and a weekend evenings of 8. So we think at all relevant times, at least as recognized under Milton zoning, for a relatively similar approach, that we are parking. So that's kind of where we're at. We are looking forward to next steps. We would encourage this board to either make a determination this evening or meet soon for the sake of listening to public input and determining a direction to proceed. I was asked at the last meeting at the Milton Arts Center whether there was an alternative approach other than the friendly 40B or standard 40B approaches. I said we haven't developed plans with respect to an alternative, but if you wanted to follow a variance approach similar to what was done on the Milton Hill House, that we could reduce to 10% affordability, and that would change the calculus in terms of the unit count and bring it down probably in the plus or minus 50 range for total apartments. That would be 5 affordables. But that's really a policy decision that the board has to engage in with the affordable housing folks, planning board and others, whether 61 plus or minus units at 25%, where all 61 units count on the SHI, versus 50 units with 5 affordables and only the 5 counting on the SHI, whether that delta of 10 or 11 units is so significant that you'd go one direction or the other. We're prepared to move in either direction. The board need to make a policy decision in which approach you think is best, and then we'll move as quickly as we can. The one thing we've asked the neighborhood association to do, they have yet to respond specifically to our request, but we've asked them on a number of occasions to please identify a working group, 3, 4, 5 people, representative of the neighborhood that can meet with us regularly to drill more specifically into changes that could be made with the design, understanding more specifically assumptions about traffic and parking. We can do it in working sessions. Each side can report out to the other, but we think that would be very helpful, and we look forward to that. It has been suggested, and then I know that I got into a bit of a debate with Alex Whiteside recently at the planning board meeting about whether we should move forward in some form of a zoning approach. My sense to that is that if the board was willing to think about calling a special town meeting in February, that we could probably get there. But we just today got a letter from the Attorney General's office saying that the zoning that was passed by town meeting in May was acceptable with respect to the Carberry property. They raised a question on the ice house relative.
Same letter, we got it.
So you got it. Well, that was 6 months ago. So that's 6 months that I would never recommend the Falcones build into their schedule. In order to get to a May town meeting, you have to have a warrant article that's ready for January. You'd have to have that same warrant article ready for February town meeting. I think we have 6 to 8 weeks to roll up our sleeves, put some more flesh on these bones, draft a development agreement, if appropriate, work on zoning, and work on the plan. We'll have the same plan between now and January that we would have if we're going to May town meeting, February Board of Appeals hearing, or getting ready to file with the state, whichever the outcome is. So we want to use that next 6 weeks to produce something that people can live with. And then let's choose the most time-efficient process to arrive at that outcome. At the end of the day, Falcones are looking for an outcome, and they want to use their time as efficiently as possible and the town's time as efficiently as possible. So with that, I'll open it to the board for questions and comments, and again, urge the board to either decide to meet and then conduct a meeting, or take public input, or help us move forward, choose a pathway for us to move forward.
Ned, thank you for this presentation. I've listened long and hard on a number of occasions on this project, and I'm still very, very concerned about traffic and safety. I think that, we worked really hard on the East Milton deck in terms of finally getting to the point and voting on the signalization. And as Selectman Wells and I, two of our focuses was on traffic and safety, and there are an awful lot of young children and seniors that still live over in that neighborhood. And I want to make sure that is a priority, because this is going to add, whether or not it really is one car per unit. I think it'll be more. It's my opinion. I think that, in talking to Chief King, we have a volume problem with traffic these days. It's volume, okay? So Waze doesn't help us, One of the commitments that we have, and I have to give credit to the police department, is enforcement, but they only have so much that they can do. They have 6 units out. When they go enforcement, they're taking a unit away from another area. And our focus has been on cut-through traffic, speed, and all of those. And I give the chief and the police department an awful lot of credit for the vigilance. And as you noticed, across town, we have a lot of speed signs. I'm worried about Bassett Street, the width of Bassett Street. We've heard people talk about that. I'm not comfortable where this sits with the families that are going to be impacted on a daily. I know that if I lived over there with my young children, or if my parents who are seniors lived over there, it would be a great concern to them. And so I think we have to keep working on this to find some way that it's acceptable with the neighborhood, because I'd be remiss if I didn't say what I really feel, and because I know that to be the truth. So
I'm glad you're saying it. It needs to be said. We're working with the town and its traffic consultant to evaluate traffic. I don't know whether the traffic counts have been certified.
We received them Thursday. John Thompson and Chase Berkeley are working through them now.
So we've heard there's trucks that go through there at early times in the mornings. That's unacceptable for the businesses. They should be after 7 o'clock. There's a lot of work, I think, that needs to be done here to get to the point where these neighbors can feel comfortable about the project, because otherwise, I myself, if I lived there, I would be on edge, because it's a huge change to a neighborhood that's had a lot of pride, and you know, I mean, just a year ago, we were talking about how we could get East Milton Deck to a point where it would be safe to cross, so that there'd be then a day where kids could cross East Milton Deck to get to school at Collycott and Cunningham, you know, and this is going to greatly impact that, because this project, the way that you want to do it, would be done before the East Milton Deck even was changed. So, and so that's, I think that all of that plays into a role on this. It's that they're all parts that have to work together, I think, because my sense is that it needs to be addressed, and I think it needs to be considered when this, as a whole. So that's where I sit on this right now.
I agree with David about the traffic issues, but I want to bring up some different issues and maybe put a different time frame and calendar on the table for you to consider. I'm glad that you sound like you're possibly open to a special town meeting to consider zoning, because I've been open to the idea of possibly exploring use variance, but I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with that. Based on, I did watch the tape of the October 26th Planning Board meeting, and so I heard what Chairman Whiteside's position was on that he'd like to see you try to do some zoning and have the Planning Board really be the party that's leading this, and knowing that there's potentially, and I think there's been allusions to this, as possibly other properties that are going to be on the table down the road. And so this is our primary business district. This is a very important area in the town. We want to get it right. Whatever is done here with this project, we need to get it right, because it's going to drive other development projects down the road. So, Ned, you talked about possibly a February special town meeting. My sense is, with the holidays coming up, given where we're at, that's just not realistic or feasible for the planning board to meet with the neighbors. We've got a lot of them here tonight, but there's a lot of voices to be heard, to hear from all the interested parties, given everything they've got on their plate, and to really try to come up with zoning for February. I just don't think, with the printing deadline, everything you'd have to have, that's realistic. I think May or June might be realistic, and I mentioned June because, you know, you think back to the dark ages, we used to have a town meeting on a Saturday in March, and then we'd continue to a Saturday in June. We had an override election in June. So I think June, before school gets out, we could still have a quorum of town meeting, and we ought to think about that, and that gives us a little bit of extra time. I think that gives the planning board the time that they might need. And then, of course, the deadline for getting a warrant article in and getting it to the warrant committee and the public hearing process before the planning board, that might work. So I would ask the Falcones and Ned, all of you, to think about that after this meeting, and whether the possibility of trying to pursue a zoning approach might work with a June town meeting. Now, I hear what you're saying about the Attorney General review, and it took 6 months for the May articles. I think partly that's a factor of how quickly we get the articles after town meeting into the Attorney General, and we could probably make a commitment. This is, you know, like I said, this is a big project for Milton. It's a very important project. I think we could, on the town side, make a commitment, and it's the town clerk. We'd have to work with the town clerk, but if it's approved at a May or June town meeting, get it in quickly to the Attorney General. I don't know, and haven't really explored this yet, whether there's any way to request an expedited review period from the Attorney General. There may not be. It may be a matter of how many town meetings, you know, if a lot of town meetings are happening in April and May, and articles from other communities are already going into the AG, maybe they've already started the review process. So it may be that, especially if we've got a bylaw that is based on either the Central Ave PUD bylaw or what the master plan's looking at for the wharf area, it's possible that that might be an expedited review at the AG's office. It may not take the length of time that we had for these others that went last May. So there are some timing factors that I think might be at play there. And that may put you in a position where, if your alternative is 40B or use variance, obviously a traditional 40B, that takes years. We all know that. We had the Randolph Avenue 40B project. Still going on. It was before the Board of Appeals, 2014, 2015, and it's still tied up at DHCD. friendly 40B, I think the only way for this board to really entertain a friendly 40B is if there's support for it from the community. I think we've been saying that. And we're still hearing a lot of the problems that David mentioned about traffic, a lot of problems about density. We haven't even gotten into design. I recognize that you've made some improvements in this project. I don't think this is the village-style design that the planning board had in mind when they said, let's design something that's really appropriate for our key business district. So I think there's going to be a lot of issues that would have to get vetted before the Board of Appeals, whether it's a traditional 40B or a friendly 40B, or use variance. I still think the use variance, well, I'm open to considering that because it could mean a smaller project. I think zoning is definitely worth exploring, and I think the town deserves to have it explored. And the Falcones have done a lot of good projects in town. They have a commitment and an investment in the town, and I think they're willing to. My sense is that the Falcones are willing to work with the town boards to really get to the right result here. And we just need to get this right. So I would like to see zoning still on the table and let the planning board process play out. If we can look at May or June, I think that might, I haven't talked to one member of the planning board today, but not the chair and not the other members. So I think their sense is that they'd like to look at a special permit or zoning for this, but rather than a use variance, timing is an issue. If May or June might work for the planning board schedule, I think it's worth your serious consideration. I seriously hope that you would consider that as an option to the 40B and to the use variance. Because again, I think the use variance, I think there's going to be some issues there that could take some time as well. So those are my preliminary thoughts on it.
So everyone knows I'm the selectman who lives there, so I watch this every day. And I spent 10 years as chief, and so I'm very familiar with the square. Actually, I made it a priority in my campaign. To Bob's credit, I don't want to throw this all on him because a lot of what is exacerbated in the square pursuant to volume, parking, traffic, is really a lot on us to fix, which is why we're moving this East Milton project, at least the traffic and signalization part of it, forward very quickly. I do the same. I just want to see something that the neighbors and the neighborhood, I understand you're going to put something there that they can embrace and accept. Change is never easy, but in the end, I agree with Katie. I want it to be something that really enhances East Milton versus exacerbating or pile on top of what already exists. I know we can never make it all go away, but volume is an issue every day. I know people come to us about speed, and Michael, you're already seeing it now from the council. Volume is a big issue, specifically East Milton between Beale Street, Adams Street, Brackett, Washington, Bates, Church Street, Church Place, getting across over to Granite Ave to get northbound to go into the town. And all those streets, and everyone off, I didn't mention them all, but anyone who lives there knows that they feel that daily pressure. This isn't all your fault. You're trying to move a project forward. My last question is, so the 10% affordable, 5 units counting on the SHI, that would be based on 50 units? A 50-unit development, correct? Okay. And that would have to go before town meeting, that type of project?
Well, that would have to be zoning.
Of a zoning variance that would,
Zoning, right.
similar to the Ice House back before?
It would be one of two avenues. It would be a rezoning process going through the planning board, or be through a variance process.
The one resident who came forward tonight, Mr. Coyle, he's really been, every day I hear something, or and that's been his background, and he is right, as far as like, you're trying to put something in an area that's already bleeding. So we have to fix this bleeding before whatever we do put there has to fit and work. And you're there every day, Bob, you see how the square is. It just, out of fairness, Stuart, I can't put all this on you because this isn't your fault. This is an issue in Eastwood that we have to try and fix, which is what we're going to try and do. But I have to agree with the neighbors, and there's so much apprehension and angst now, just as the way it exists today as it is, without adding a hot dog truck to the square, and what that could bring, never mind, proposing 71 units. So I will say this to you, Mr. Chair, if the East Milton Neighborhood Group wants to put the committee together, if you want, I will volunteer to try and help facilitate that or work with them. I mean, I already talked to Art. I mean, I live right there, so whatever I can do to try and help get us to, like, as you both described, where we want to be.
We've had a request by Stephen Rhines, the president of EMNA.
I saw that.
For a committee that would be appointed, by either the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board. We just need to make sure whether or not a sitting member of the board could.
Even if we put it, I'll go that way too. I'm like, I just want to see.
I don't know, because we want, but one thing I agree, we want to help satisfy this need, and we appreciate that EMNA is willing to work. We want to work with everyone as well too. But we have, we can only do so much, we're told by council, in terms of contributing during this phase. So.
I agree with you. I think,
any suggestions?
I guess my question on that is, why can't EMNA appoint their own representatives to work with us? Why are they asking the town?
I just want to clarify that. Were they asking the town? I thought they were looking to just put together a few people.
They had asked, I received an email today requesting that the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board help appoint a committee.
That was how I interpret that too. That's why I said what I said, but
I don't think I saw that email.
I'm fine with if we appointed, I just think that.
Hold it up just in case if you want to read it.
The neighbors.
I wanted to be clear on that.
That came from Steve Rhines today. I got the same email.
I think communication is really important. I think
is
the one way to do this is to keep communicating.
I did see this, yeah.
That's how you're going.
That paragraph.
I went to every single thing that you did when you started Novara, and I know how hard you worked on that. I know what you did there to make that a reality today. I know that you live here. I know you're vested here, and I know that you're not, some big corporation coming in here who's gonna. And I know that you'll sit and listen and do the best you can. But I mean, you're in business and this and that, and I just think that communication. I've said this to Arthur. I've said it to Steve. Like, keep communicating is the best way to try and get something that not just meets your goals, but really helps to make East Milton Square, like you say, the master plan. There's a vision here, and I think that we're not here for a long time. We're here for a short time, and I think that we need to work on this to try and do something that enhances it, not exacerbates it.
So I think for full clarity, I think we're all open, and we want, I know I specifically want the neighborhood to be able to have people that they feel most appropriate to be in these meetings, to represent them and to bring information back to that neighborhood, because I think that that's going to further help this cause. For us, communication is the key to get to where the neighborhood feels comfortable, and that's my position on this. I need the neighborhood to feel comfortable before ever committing to anything. I have too many questions, with the traffic and with the safety and the entire volume of traffic that flows through those neighborhoods right now, to feel comfortable with the project. I agree with them, but I think that a working group could help find solutions. And so, maybe we'll have a conversation with Stephen Rhines and try to figure out how best to move forward and circle back to you so that we can get a working group that is agreeable, but to the community and to you guys.
So,
my sense would be that the neighborhood association should designate their own working group.
That would be I would prefer that, but
we've asked for.
I don't know.
And no one responds. They don't return phone calls or anything.
Well, as you said, we could certainly follow that up with them.
We can follow that up.
Concerned they should be calling us.
So.
Now, is there any initial feedback you could give us on the idea of February is something you might be willing to consider? Is May or June, which is, we're talking just a few months. I understand you might need more time after the meeting.
We need to think that through. What I'm hearing, I think, is an unstated consensus that we ought to be looking at a 10% alternative from an affordability perspective. Because if you're going to go to town meeting with a bylaw change that's consistent with what the town has done, it's 10% affordables, and/or if we would going to reach a consensus on a variance approach because town meeting was just going to take too long. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think May and June is optimistic in terms of timing just because of that process. But I think it's possible that if you have an engaged community set of representatives working with us in an engaged process, that we can we'll either arrive at an outcome that everybody can live with or we won't. And we'll do that within the next 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. And from there, we can pick the most effective approach to securing the outcome. And whether that approach is, at that point, we all agree that a variance is a better approach than going through town meeting, fine, or we'll go town meeting.
I think May, June is more realistic than February, because really, in the next few weeks with Thanksgiving, the holidays coming, I think 6 to 8 weeks is just optimistic that the planning board, we can't, obviously we can't speak for them, but that they're going to be able to put together even a draft of zoning, even basing it on the Central Ave PUD or the 88 Wharf PUD.
My fundamental concern about going to the planning board is the volume of other things that I have in front of them and that are coming. Because with the approval today by the Attorney General's office, Jack Dawley's getting ready quickly to file for his special permit for the 54 units out at Carberry. That's going to take a lot of time with the planning board, based on the history of the process that we went through at Woodmere. And I've got several others that are of similar volume. We're not going to get, I'm concerned about the quality of the time that we will get in the process with the planning board to arrive at a zoning outcome in any reasonable time frame. I understand, and I don't disagree that February is unrealistic. It's unrealistic from a lot of reasons. It's why I said February, because from a time perspective, it can work. But I think that February also gets you to the same point on a design and on a set of impact mitigation measures that you can take to the Board of Appeals in a variance process. My other concern about zoning is that it will presumably be broader than this property. It can be just devoted to this property, and so I would fight to keep it to this property. But if it starts to look like it's going to encompass more than this property, that invites a whole lot of other angst and concern about what other properties and what conditions and who's the next neighborhood that's closest to it and the impact that might have. There's a lot of, you start the dominoes going, and I'm concerned about that. So I think, I agree also. I understand that from zoning is often a better way because you get a broader sense of support from the town and town meeting when it says yes. But town meeting looks to what the neighborhood is saying. The Board of Appeals looks to what the neighborhood is saying and the boards are saying. So I think it may or may not be necessary. And most of East Milton, other than the areas that just happen to be within the business zone as it was drawn in 1938, most of the properties over there have been redeveloped through some form of a variance process, and that includes the fruit center, that includes the office building at the corner of Squantum, that includes the Blue Hills Bank building. There are a good half a dozen plus properties that were developed under variance processes rather than by zoning, and for whatever reasons that took place when it did, for one reason or another, the town determined not to extend the commercial zone west to Squantum, rather than worked through those processes under variance. So, as I said, we'll work on what's the best right
That's why I agree with you that a lot of them, the fruit center included, were built under variances. That's why I'm saying I'm open to considering use variance. I just think there's going to be a number of challenges going through the Board of Appeals process. Even if the boards decide to come around to it, there still may be neighborhood issues, or maybe the boards won't even get there. So I think you've got risks with that also, but the zoning process.
But the risk of getting of 67% of town meeting being willing to say yes when those same issues may be percolating on the Board of Appeals side, I mean, you're either going to solve those issues, and the board's going to be willing to do it, the town meeting's going to be willing to do it, or you can't, and neither is going to be willing to do it. So I think the risks are the same. And they're very similar.
I think the risk, the risk of the use variance is probably a little bit greater, but with that, in talking with Brian Perez of the Planning Board today, we talked a little bit about this timeline idea, possibly May or June, and his thinking was, obviously, there's a view that we'd like to do a more general zoning so that if you do, it's going to apply to other properties in the square. You could try to do something that's a little more site-specific as a lead to something that's broader for other properties down the road. And that's a little bit similar to what the Master Plan Implementation Committee was trying with the wharf, because we talked about, should we try to zone for East Milton or should we try to zone for the village? And the thinking was the village, you have fewer residents abutting that business area. There's much fewer challenges, so let's start with the village, and then hopefully extrapolate that to the square at some point. But it's possible you could try to take what's under consideration now and then apply it more broadly to different parts of the square, or to a wider overlay district. So I think there's some options, and I hear what you're saying, Ned, that there's a lot of other projects coming before the planning board. This is a very important project too, and it is our key business district, and I would think that the planning board could maybe delegate a couple of members to work on this, maybe form a subcommittee. I think there's options for them. Not having talked with them, can't speak for them, but the planning staff could certainly be, town administrator can make sure the planning staff has the resources it needs. If we need to reach out to an MAPC or someone else for outside help, I think all of these, as important as the Canton Ave property is, this property is critical and is going to lead and determine what the square looks like for the next 50 years. So we got to get this one right. And if it means pulling in some more resources, we may have to just figure out a way that we can do it. If you're open to considering a special town meeting a little bit later than February to give the necessary time to get there.
We will talk specifically about that. That's a path to an outcome. So in my mind, the path to the outcome isn't as important today as how quickly can we collectively arrive at what the outcome wants to be, and then what's the path that gets it approved is secondary. So if people of goodwill, all of us of goodwill, can work together to listen to the concerns and address the concerns. I mean, I think we're hearing that if this board is thinking that zoning is the alternative that you'd rather see, even relative to whether we do a variance, that's telling me you'd like us to look at 10%, which is a different project than we've been working on for the last 3 months. So Falcones need to know that if they switch gears and move on a project that is with a 10% inclusion, and what those numbers can look like relative to height, density, traffic, parking, et cetera, we'll move in that direction. But we're going to move in that direction knowing that there's going to be a general feeling of support for the outcome, because we're now bringing this project much closer in line.
We understand that, and I think that that's why this working group needs to happen, because I think we need the neighborhood's input and desires to fit so that we can move forward on that to then make our determination, because I think that, we respect where the neighborhood sits with this development and their concerns, and we want to make sure that they're comfortable before we do make a decision. I think that that's going to play a lot of the role in our decision.
And I think with the expertise on the planning board, it may be that it's 10%, it may be that it's 12%, depending on how the negotiations go and what the project looks like and all the different factors that come into play. There may be some variation in that. Obviously, it depends on whether it's economically feasible for the developer. But I think I just don't want you to take zoning off the table, because watching the planning board, the indication was that's really not even an option. It's not going to work for timing, but I think we can help with the timing to try to move that schedule up a little bit that hopefully would work for the developer and get a good project at the same time.
Can I follow up to what you said, Katie? Could the chair make a formal request to the chair of the planning board to create a subcommittee to specifically work on this? I mean, I think if it came from us as an official request, that might give it a little more weight, that, you know, how seriously we're taking this.
Yeah.
Expediting that would be extremely helpful.
I think there should be a conversation between you and the chair of the planning board as to what our conversation was about tonight, that it sounds like we'd like to see some zoning.
We need a working group, and what I'm gathering is that the EMNA would like us to help appoint that group, as opposed to EMNA deciding who's going to be on that group, and that's the sense that I've gotten. At least that's what I read from the email.
I got the same opinion than when I read it. that they were
I
looking
just,
for us to-
I'd love to get a pool of interested applicants, that would make it a lot easier than just appointing certain people, I think it's always advantageous to know who might, be able to play a greater role from the neighborhood, and if, in fact, we are able to have a sitting member of the Board of Selectmen, and Selectman Wells, who lives in the neighborhood, if that's okayed by John Flynn, our town council, then I would be in favor of doing so. I just don't know the legalities to that.
The question of a formal working group just seems a little strange to me, because we haven't really had that with other development projects. I thought the neighborhood was really looking for that group themselves to designate a few people who would work with the developer, kind of independent of the boards, but have some discussion, but also then be part of the planning board process that would draft some zoning.
That's typically what we have had with any other of the projects that have occurred.
We're looking for 3 to 5 people who live in East Milton, who can be appointed by the East Milton Neighborhood Association to meet with us, and in working sessions with architects, traffic engineers, landscape architects, to help make decisions or make recommendations they can take back to their membership, and we'll consider, and we can bring those periodically as necessary to the boards. But we're doing, we asked for. We had a large neighborhood. We met in July July or August with the board of the neighborhood association at the library. We then had a meeting with 250 plus or minus at the East Milton Congregational Church. We set up a meeting in this room with Mike and with Bill Clark, and invited the neighborhood association to send some representatives to just sit down with us and start discussions. We thought a couple of people were going to come, and then they didn't, and then the neighborhood association, so we haven't met and we haven't considered, so fine. We then went back to a second presentation at the Milton Art Center. Another couple hundred people were there. And that was...
We were there.
You were there.
We were there.
You were the other ones. But, that was a month ago. And so we've now spent the last month refining the 25% model, again asking for representation from the neighborhood association to come in and start to meet with us so that we can, and all we want is some direction on what scale of project to be thinking about as we move forward, because they're spending money, lots of it, on designs and other things, and we want to stop the bleeding if it's going in the wrong direction. So if 10% sounds like it's maybe the right number that we should be working towards, we can shift that focus, and we can start to design the building in context with input from the neighbors, and we can arrive at something that maybe everybody's willing to live with. If at the end of the day we can't, because it just doesn't solve enough questions, then the Falcones make their decisions beyond that. But I think they want to work to an outcome that works for the town. I certainly want to help them work towards that outcome. I think this board wants that to happen. Planning board would like to see it happen, and we'd like to try and arrive at that outcome. Having said that, I don't want to be back here a year from now without having made any progress. And my concern is that time is going to slip, because the only party here that has any concern about the passage of time is this guy. Because the longer it takes, nobody else cares at the end of the day. You delay it, gets delayed, nothing happens, the impacts are delayed, the timing gets this or that, And they're not prepared to take that time, and I don't blame them. So what I'm trying to do is cajole the process to move in a direction as quickly as possible and work towards an outcome as quickly as possible so that they don't just bleed cash for no reason.
Can I just add something to that, Mr. Chairman? I think it's important for the abutters and the neighbors, the ones who are here and the ones who are watching on TV and will eventually hear from their neighbors about this. That's an important offer that the developer is putting out there. You know, we've got a local developer who's got an investment in the community, who's built some good projects in this town. And we've had projects in the past where we've had out-of-town developers, out-of-state developers, including on some very big proposals, a 300-unit development. Those developers were not willing to engage in discussions with the neighborhood. They were going forward with what they wanted, and they weren't really willing to have those conversations. There are other projects where we've tried to have conversations, reduce the size, reduce the density, do a different design, and developers were not even willing to have those conversations or entertain that. So I think this is a good faith effort by the developer to try to engage some of the neighborhood as to what can make this project the best project for Milton, the best project for the business district, and get us all to a place that Milton deserves at the end, which is a good project for this critical area. So I really would encourage the neighborhood to try to get a handful of people who can sit down and have a serious conversation with the developer, see whether there are issues that can be worked out and whether all these traffic and density and design issues that are being brought to the different boards and the different forums can really be worked out in a small working environment with this developer.
I agree, and I think that the, you know, I'm just still a little bit confused because, you know, I want the neighborhood to be heard for all their concerns, and, you know, and I'd like the suggestions as to why they want a Board of Selectmen or a planning board to appoint it when I think that the neighborhood knows best who is best to represent them in these meetings, because I would not want to let them down by appointing the wrong people. And, you know, I want this neighborhood to get what it wants, and I think that that's clear, because I believe, you know, yep, Mr. Falcone has done great projects, and like you said, he's a member of the, you know, the business community here, and I think that if the neighborhood can have its say, it's possible that you could come up to an outcome that is satisfiable to them. But, you know, I stand with them with their concerns until so. So, Michael, I would suggest that you, as town administrator, we have a conversation with Stephen Rhines.
Certainly.
You know, to follow up on this and to get to a resolution as soon as possible. Selectman Wells has offered to sit in this group if it is something that
Town council approves. Yep.
Town council approves. But I want to move forward on this because I want to get this done quickly because I think that the neighborhood deserves it, and I think the developer deserves it. I think that the communication needs to be at a high level, and it needs to be able to be you know, discussed and suitable for all.
And just, the planning board meets next Tuesday. So if this board would like them to consider, I'd ask that it get on their agenda for next Tuesday.
Good.
And especially whether the timing would work for them in terms of a warrant article.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the residents that came
Everyone came in tonight.
and shared their opinions and their concerns. We appreciate it.
Take care. See you, council.
Okay. Item number 12 is approval of a one-day liquor license. The Eustis Estate has submitted a request for one-day liquor license for several upcoming lectures and events. We have a motion before us.
Yeah, I'm going to vary this one up a little bit because it looks like there's, based on the attachments, there's a couple of different parties involved here. So I'm going to move that we approve a one-day liquor license for Historic New England and RBC Wealth Management.
Gareth, can I?
For the Eustis Estate at 1424 Canton Avenue for its Women, Wine, and Wall Street educational series on Thursday, December 7th, 2017, January 25th, 2018, February 22nd, 2018, from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m., and that we approve a one-day liquor license for the Eustis Estate Museum Historic New England for its Christmas Cheers Holiday Open House on Sunday, December 3rd, December 10th, and December 17th, 2017, from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., for its Spirit of Christmas Past, 4 Centuries of Christmas in New England lecture on Tuesday, December 12th, from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m., and for its Merry Historic Milton Holiday House Tour on Friday, December 15th, 2017, from 5:30 to 9 o'clock p.m.
Second.
Any discussion? It's quite a mouthful.
That's a lot.
Good work. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item number 13 on our agenda is approval of the FY 2018 stormwater utility fee rates. And we're fortunate enough to have Jay Fundling, who's been an invaluable volunteer of the Stormwater Fee Advisory Committee. He's going to attend our meeting to discuss a method by which the committee determined the recommended rates, which will factor out to 1.88 per 100th square feet of impervious surface. Good evening, Jay.
Didn't hear any of that.
Thank you for bearing with us. We were just introducing you as a valuable member and a volunteer of our community who's working with us on the stormwater utility fee rates.
Okay. Yes, I am Jay Fundling of 39 Sias Lane. So there you go. All right. So, yes, I'd like to, let's move this a little closer. Yeah, just go over some of the numbers we looked at for the stormwater fees and our committee's recommendations. And this is, I believe, the second time tonight we're thanking Alan Bishop from the DPW. I heard the Shade Tree Advisory Committee thanked him for his help, and I certainly thank him for the help here, and hope I don't misrepresent anything he told me. So let's look at this first slide here. This slide is just going over the fees that were in use in 2017, and as we can see, there's a large jump in fees from the residential. It's a 4-tier structure, and the jump from Tier 3 to Tier 4 is fairly significant, and that's one of the things that's really what our committee was concentrating on and seeing what we can do to alleviate this. Also, I have listed on the right-hand side, just for informational purposes, the average size of the property that was used in calculating these rates. For example, in Tier 4, the rate was $1.56 per 100 square feet of impervious surface, and the fee was $156. You back that out, that says that, well, the average lot in that tier when setting the rates was 10,000 square feet. So that's just a sort of a starting point. And anytime I'm talking about sizes tonight, I'm talking about impervious square feet on a lot. Even if I don't say that, that's what I mean to say. So we can go on to the next slide, and this will be the rate that is going to be in effect for fiscal year 2018, and this, again, comes from the DPW, Alan Bishop's work. It's driven by two things primarily. There's the required revenue, which was approved by town meeting, of $793,000 plus, and that's 11.3% higher than the previous year. The other thing it's driven by is the square feet used in setting this rate is 8% lower than the square feet used in the previous rate. And I'll refer you to the DPW for the differences there, but they cleaned up and have much better data than what was used to set the rates the previous year. So where does that all end up in this? We have a 20.9% increase in the per square foot rate from last year to this year. So that's what we're starting with. So the next slide. So this slide shows if we kept our 4-tier system with no changes, same 4 tiers, same cutoff as last year, just the two things, the cleaned up data from the DPW and the $1.88 rate, where would that get us? Well, we would have, our 4-tier structure would have 4 tiers of fees of $32, $44, $61, and $149. So one that might leap out at you is Tier 4 has gone down by 4%. So even though the rate per square foot has gone up by over 20%, what they would pay in fees has gone down by 4%. And that is due to the fact that the average square foot in that tier, now that we have this improved data that we can look at, is now just under 8,000 square feet. So instead of thinking that the average house in that tier had 10,000 square feet of impervious surface, now we are more confident that it has under 8,000 square feet. So that's one change. And that's what will lead to that 4% decrease. but still probably not good enough to address the issues that, we were asked to address by this committee. So we took a look at really for Tier 4, it's a wide range. It's going from just over 4,000 square feet up to some houses in town have almost 60,000 square feet. So it's tough to set one fee and charge that one fee to a 5,000 square foot house and a 55,000 square foot house and say, yep, you should pay the same fee. I mean, there's always going to be some imprecision, but that's a very wide range. So we looked at, can we split up that range? Is that an appropriate thing to do? So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this slide, so I'll take it slowly. Let's start with, this graph. This graph represents all the houses in Tier 4 in Milton. Every dot, every little circle you see is one house. Over to the left, where it starts at the 4,200 square feet, all the dots are on top of each other. There are a lot of houses, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square feet of impervious surface, up to, I don't know, 6,000, 7,000, up to 10,000. You've got a lot of houses there. Between 10 and 20,000, you have a lot fewer houses. 20 and 30,000, even fewer houses. You could probably count those dots. Then we go all the way up to, we have a handful of houses at 40,000 square feet, 50,000, one house at 50, I'm guessing 57,000 just by looking at the graph. So this is just a representation of what size range and how many houses do we have in this tier. Okay, so now that we've got that, if we want to split up this group, how do we split it up? Well, we could guess a couple things. We could say, well, how about 10,000 square feet? 10,000 has a lot of zeros in it. Or we could say, let's cut it in half. Let's take the top 50%, the bottom 50%. I can tell you that if we cut it in half, right at 50%, the cut would be right in the middle of that dense portion right over left there. So that may not be very satisfying. We'd still have a very dense group, all in the top half, and then say the top half and the bottom half. So let's ask ourselves, what do we really want to do? What's the goal here? The goal here is to split this up into 2 or more different groups that are similar to each other, that make sense. It's a sensible way to split them up. Fortunately, there are mathematical ways to split up groups in sensible ways. What I used was something called the Jenks natural break algorithm. It's publicly available. You can download the software and run it. And what it does is it separates your group of points so that all the points in one group are as similar as possible to the people in their own group, and they're as different as possible from the other group. So it's what it says in its name. It tries to create a natural break. See where it can set a break so that it's not just arbitrary. It's, okay, this group is the dense cluster and this group is the outliers. In addition to, whether or not in addition to trying to create 2 groups that make sense together, we also, I think as a committee, liked that it wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't us as a committee saying, let's pick 10,000 square feet. It wasn't us as a committee saying, let's draw the line here, and the Jones family is on one side and the Smith family is on the other side. It was something leading us to an algorithm that someone else said, or some other entity said, okay, this is a sensible place to make the break, rather than just picking something.
It's defensible.
Yes.
It's defensible.
Mm-hmm. And something very similar has been used in utilities in testifying in front of the state of Massachusetts. I found some references to similar things.
Have any other communities used this in stormwater?
This, I have no idea. Good question.
That's one good question.
So the first thing we did was take this group of points and split it into 2. All right, we split into 2, and the natural break we find is at just over 16,000 square feet. You have 1,600 houses in the bottom group and 84 houses in the top group, and the bottom group would have a fee of $132. Top group would have a fee of $473. Okay, that's a start. That's a first pass. It's maybe not as much of an improvement for the bottom tier as we had hoped, but it's something we can stick in our back pocket and move forward with. So the next slide is, what if we had 2 breaks to break this into 3 groups? We would have 1,400 in the smallest group paying $118. The next group would have 272 houses paying $275. The top group would have only 14 houses, and they'd pay $856. Now, as much as I just said a few minutes ago, we don't want to be arbitrary. $856 sounds like a lot of money to me, and so that sounds pretty high, so thought let's take one more whack at it and let's break it up into 4, but then see what we can do with it. So the next thing that we looked at, and what our committee ultimately was happy with, was find the 3 natural breaks, but take those top 2 groups and call them one group. So then where does that leave us? That leaves us with the bottom group is everything below 8,300 square feet. And that's below 8,300 square feet. That's just under 75% of that group. So that's the dense group on the left. We're calling that dense group. Hey, you're one group. You're very similar to each other. As I said, just under 75% of the group. The second group is between 8,300 square feet and almost 16,000 square feet. That's that sort of less dense group between the 2 yellow lines you're seeing there. We're saying, okay, you're another group. That was about 22% of the total number of houses. And we would put them in their separate group. And the third group would be combining these 2 largest groups you see up there. And that's just over, that's approximately 5% of the total group, and that's the scattered large houses that you see over on the right. And if we take those average sizes, apply $1.88 to them, we'll get for our first group, $110 is the fee, second group, $205 is the fee, and this third group that's made up of the largest 87 houses would be $468. So that, in the end, is what the committee ended up recommending. If we can get the final slide. Okay, so this final slide shows us just where did we end up. So the first 3 tiers are what we saw earlier. The Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 would see a $4, $8, and $9 increase versus last year. But then for the people in Tier 4, you would have 1,244 houses in Tier 4, going from a $156 fee last year to a $110 fee this year. That's a $46 decrease. And compared to their neighbors, the jump is only from $61 to $110, going from Tier 3 to Tier 4. Okay. Then you'd have 374 houses. They're in that next largest tier. They'd have a fee of $205, which is a $49 increase from last year. And the very top group of the largest houses, the largest 87 houses in town, again, going on impermeable surface, would be paying a fee of $468. So that is a significant increase from last year. But keep in mind, these are houses with over 15,000 square feet of impermeable surface. And that's what we're setting our stormwater fee on. I'm not sure what any of their individual situations is, but these are houses with a large amount of impermeable surface.
And these are total fees?
That's the annual fee.
Annual fee, total, right.
Right.
Yeah, so if I might, I can't thank Jay enough. As we put this committee together, we were looking for residents who had a concern with what they considered was inequity in the lower half of that 4th tier, where you jumped, your stormwater fee tripled. Tom Hurley was on our committee, now a resident. I know he's not on this board. I think he's on every other board in town.
Every other board, right.
But Tom was a wealth of information because he championed this effort last year. Jerry Burke, who is a resident who brought a lot of this stuff to our attention. I will say that we did get a good amount of phone calls when the bills went out in February from people in that 4th tier, just those people that fell off a cliff, if you would, or fell into that break before we set forth on this algorithm. So it was a very fruitful process whereby not only did we bring in Ian Cook from the Ponset River Watershed to get his take, and Tabor Haley from MAPC, because they were the advisory staff, but Jay spent a lot of his own time down at the DPW yard going over more solid data about impervious area with Alan Bishop. So that reduction in square footage, which led to a higher price, is a more solid number of impervious as a total for the town. Jay then took several of these versions home with him and came up with this break and the committee as a group really appreciated the fourth tier being broken into three pieces, where you see that main group of people. If you look at tier 4.1, that's 3/4. I think Jay said just under 3/4 of that fourth tier are looking at a 29% reduction based on what they paid last year.
What they were last year.
Yeah. So it's.
Yeah, I feel like I gave a long monologue and didn't stop and ask for questions, so...
Oh, but you better write this down, because I have a feeling there's going to be other communities asking us how we get.
Yeah, no, I want to commend you, Jay, and you know, I think that when we went through this process, you know, people like you and Jerry Burke, you know, who had, you know, a lot of serious questions, but had solutions, were willing to step up here to help us, because we knew it was going to be a work in progress. And I think by virtue of putting good people together who were knowledgeable and who were going to be vigilant about what was going to be best practice for us as we move forward, that's what's gotten us to these numbers, which I think is, you know, we have that responsibility here to the taxpayer to make sure that we have the best possible scenarios for them. And I think that you've helped us get there, so thank you.
Yeah, I agree, thank you. I am concerned about the 468. It is, and granted, these are people with large properties, with large impervious space, but it's still a big jump from what they paid this past year.
When you think about it, the size of the property you're describing, you're talking massive, you know, just, it's not the average.
No, yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's more than fair. I think there's a big difference between a person who has 60,000 and 4,000.
Yeah.
It's not even
And
apples
there's
and
78, as I recall, 78 in that category.
There's 87.
87, sorry, I had it backwards.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate what's on their property, but, you know, maybe it would be a one-on-one conversation with someone at the DPW and say, sir, look what's in your backyard.
And one just other question that I know we had talked about on other occasions, are credits. Are we going to continue to look towards a credit system?
So this committee was just charged with
Well, I
looking.
understand that. This is just a down the road.
No, I've had conversations with a couple of very, very smart residents who think they have come up with something with respect to crediting people for work they have done.
Yeah, I just think we put that on the radar again, because I don't want to forget that there is opportunity for that. People do take a lot of pride in making sure that they.
That may have a different look of a committee. But Jay's work, both with the audit committee last year and with this, his intellect with numbers is second to none. That group might involve more of an engineering type, architect type thing, people that design land, and but definitely something that we would look at as a town to provide credits for people that.
Of course, something we'll have to keep in mind, the revenue requirement won't change. Right. So if we give taxpayer A a credit that is fairly determined, then every other taxpayer will be paying a little bit more.
Right.
So square footage goes down.
Correct. Right.
Well, and to that point, you know, there has been talk that federal and state level, there may be some changes in this permit, what the requirements are, and that's beyond this conversation, but I just think we as a board have to keep, and the town management has to keep in mind that, you know, we're still looking at, for Tier 1, a 14% increase, for Tier 2, a 22% increase. So they're small dollar amounts, but the percentages these are big percentage jumps, and people are paying a significantly higher amount of taxes because of the override. These bills stormwater bills are going up, and we just need to keep a handle on what services we're providing within this.
And we did talk tonight earlier, I think it was fitting or coincidental maybe, that we had pilot, you know, to try to bring down the tax rates for our residents. So, you know, we have both of these moving parts where, you know, one's going up slightly a little bit, but we're hopeful that another one of our committees could help reduce that and make that a little bit easier on our residents.
Well, a lot of this was in the DPW budget to begin with, so we moved it out of the operating budget into a fee, and I think we need to really keep a handle on what what the
Use
services,
what- yeah, what the service
what
provider
the services are the DPW is providing, what the federal and state requirements are. And while I don't necessarily want us to make a decision based on whether the federal government changes the requirements, because clean stormwater and water flowing into rivers, and we want to have clean rivers, that's important, but we've got to be mindful about these increases.
Yeah,
These are jumps.
a good portion of this is reevaluating the impervious area, now that DPW has a better grasp on what the impervious is. I mean, it was 11% in dollars that were approved at town meeting, when it went from 700 and change to almost 800. The other difference was better data with respect to impervious, which drew the impervious number down and inflated the per square foot number, which Chase would tell you if he were here tonight, he could defend that number in years going forward, and then any credits or additions or anything like that will be seen as a truer number in the impervious aggregate.
Sometimes people just don't realize, when they turn their water on, they wash, whatever it is we use it for, we have water quality and we have to protect that. We just do.
Can you stop by my house on the way home?
What do you want me to do?
Turn the faucets off.
Oh, okay.
Turn the lights off.
Now you're talking. We have a motion before us.
Well, yeah, I'll reluctantly move.
I could do it.
Well, I know my rate, I'm just joking about the 468. I mean, it is a high number, so it's reluctantly, but to approve the FY18 stormwater utility fee rates recommended by the Stormwater Fee Advisory Committee as follows: Tier 1, $32, Tier 2, $44, Tier 3, $61, Tier 4A, $110. I think that should be Tier 4.1, Tier 4.2, $205, and Tier 4.3, $468.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Again to Jay.
Yeah, thank you again, Jay.
Yeah, Jay.
Mike, all of you for just...
We appreciate all the time you spent on it. It's duly noted. Thank you.
Yeah. And
All in favor?
As I said,
Aye.
As I said, Alan Bishop did great work. Every time I thought I had a clever thing to suggest, he had already thought of it.
That's great. You're lucky to have Helen, that's for sure.
Yeah, Alan's one of those employees, nobody knows. He's behind the curtain.
I know.
Right? He's tracking, the GIS layers here. When I came from Boston, I may have said this before, I brought a GIS expert with me to take a look at what we were doing, and he said the town of Milton is light years ahead of Boston, which he spent a lot of time in as a consultant, and the state and other labs, and he just continues to add layers onto this GIS. It's amazing, yeah. So, thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, so item number 14 is a discussion preliminary FY 2019 budget. So, here we are. Mike?
Yeah, budgets are due on Friday. Town accountant has received some of the smaller ones already.
Just contingents, right?
Yeah.
Just contingent, okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's no, there's no special items this year. Yeah, and in addition, we're working through the capital budget, which I mentioned earlier tonight. We're going to present to the Capital Improvement Committee Wednesday morning, our first findings with that. There's obviously some items that need to be bonded and other items that we could use as a one-time expense. So waiting to see where the free cash comes in. Dialogue as recently as this morning, today, between the town accountant and the Mass DOR representative to see where we are with respect to free cash. We'll present the capital improvement stuff on Wednesday.
Thank you.
To them to get their feedback and bring it back to the table. I anticipate that they will ask for a specific subject matter expert to come and elaborate on one or two of the items, but I think we had a series of go-arounds with each of the department heads, and we have a pretty good grasp on what they're talking about with these projects and can answer most of the questions that the Capital Improvement Committee can have, but because they are so thorough, that we may have to bring them in for a subsequent one. Again, budget to due Friday. We talked about setting, you're going to add 1% to your general expenditures. On par, we use 3% for utilities. We want everyone to use that. Last year when we came in, we saw, one of the departments might have used 5% for utilities, and another one used 2, and another one's used 4. So at the preliminary hearing, we set some parameters as to what we're looking for expenditures. We'll see where the revenues come in. Obviously, we got the tax levy tonight from Mr. Bushway and this board. So more to come in the weeks. Very active stuff. I can get into a little bit of it, but we're meeting. Great suggestion by Tom Hurley and the Warrant Committee that I bring town treasurer, town assessor, town accountants, and members of the school committee budget team to the Warrant Committee next Monday night, just to go over some, who am I, what do I do, what's my role in town government, some stuff that you saw from Bob Bushway tonight, so that the Warrant Committee knows what to look for when we present the budget to them sometime soon. So.
Mike, we haven't seen the budgets yet, so I guess one general question is, are there any new positions in any of them, or
no,
none?
No
Nothing?
positions. No,
Okay.
no.
Just vacants, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing that wasn't approved in the override?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I know John is waiting for a class to come out.
Right.
Chief King's waiting for a class to come out, hit a couple offices, retire, move on. So that stuff there, that's just filling holes, vacancies. But yeah, haven't seen all the budgets yet, but it's not, we won't see any new positions coming in.
Probably for police and fire, where we wound up and landed on for overtime last year is probably being carried forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, there was a conversation in Boston when we put our budgets together. We factored in their straight time raise into their overtime raise. If you don't do that overtime, it completely depletes your surplus, or you run a deficit shortly. So when we get the numbers in, we're going to take a look at them and see if that's something that we have to embed into it, because all these collective bargaining agreements, when they get a raise for straight time, that has to be accounted for in the overtime wages as well. And it wasn't necessarily collected from all the departments as a part of their budget submission.
And the law budget we increased last year in anticipation of some additional expenses. So are we carrying that? Is the plan to carry that level?
Yeah, that will be level funded. It is a specific concern of the town accountant to possibly give that a little more money if we can balance the budget. The one thing we are asking for from the Selectman's office is the Chief Procurement Officer, Arlene Zuniga, who's doing a fantastic job, thinks it might be a 32-hour job. So we're gonna ask the Warrant Committee to increase her hours from 20 to 32. She's here Monday to Thursdays, and she needs a full day Monday to Thursdays to get all her work accomplished. It's busy. She's collecting everything from all the departments and trying to get a system in place while continuing to file for grants and work through RFPs and all that stuff. So that's the one caveat in the Selectman's office is that we're
Some of
looking
it just startup time that over time she might not need, or do you think that's going to be going forward? She will need to be.
She's very, very efficient. I know she did the startup times. She's gone to a couple of seminars and getting caught up on SoftWrite, the financial software system in the town has taken up a bit of her time. But she's confident that she's going to need a couple more hours a week to really maximize the position. And I know that was the concern of the Town Government Study Committee. I had a brief discussion with Phil Matthews at town meeting. He was very psyched that we got a very qualified person, and then wondered what the next step was is this a full-time job? Where does it sit? Is it both town and school POs, contracting and stuff like that? So that's to be worked out, but very confident that it's a little more than a part-time position.
Okay. I guess the only difference is that makes that position eligible for health insurance, but.
Be eligible 20.
Was that what it was?
She's currently at 20 hours, so
She's eligible 20.
Sure. But
so when are the budgets going to be sent to the Warrant Committee? Because we should get copies of them also.
yeah, so it'll probably take us two weeks to get through them. So I'm thinking first week in December, which is when we used to receive them last year. I just started that week, and budgets were being submitted on December 1st. So asking for them 2 weeks earlier, and obviously you have your big ones. You have your DPW and your schools and those other ones. The smaller ones we can present to you and the Warrant Committee a lot sooner than we did last year.
Okay.
There's only one budget, not two. It should be I won't say it.
Seamless.
It should be a much easier process this year, with not asking for anything extraordinary. And the capital budget looks pretty good so far. The town accountant started crunching some numbers this week. The asks are consistent with what people were asking for last year,
right,
which is a big question with the capital committee. You know, if it was a priority last year and it wasn't funded, why did it drop off the ledger this year? And that's not the case. So,
How about RFTs? How you doing? You getting hit with many reserve fund transfer?
no, not yet. Touch wood. It's only
okay,
we're not halfway through the year, but nothing unforeseen.
Nothing big unforeseen.
No. So that's always good. And then snow's the RFT bandit, right? Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So item 15, I'm going to ask if we can defer the logistics of transition from the 3 to 5 member board to our next meeting, because this has been a long meeting.
That's a good idea.
And I just think that I want us to have a little bit more energy and maybe give it a little bit more thought. Maybe each one of us could kind of could send some or draft up our own notes to be prepared to have a 15-minute solid discussion and continue this discussion as we move forward towards the reality of it. So I think that let's start with the next meeting, and I think that as we see fit, maybe it's every other meeting as we move forward that we continue to contribute and how we want to see this all play out, so that it's a seamless transition. At least we're setting kind of the policy of how we'd like to see it shape, for when it does go into place. If that's okay with you all.
Sure.
Fine.
Okay, boards and committees appointment, Commission on Disability.
I propose to appoint Catherine Upham of 59 Amore Road to the Commission on Disability to serve through July 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I do know that the Commission on Disability is also looking for more individuals, so if we can keep looking. I know their chair, Diane DeTulio,
And I mentioned to Diane in a meeting that wasn't televised, we talked about in public at the town meeting that I potentially may have a few people interested. So I put it out there, and I'm just waiting to hear. So let's hope that they have the time to be able to serve, because it's so important.
Diane is watching. I just heard that her mom passed, and the funeral was during Veteran Day services on Saturday. So
condolences.
I want to send our condolences to her on that. I know she gave a lot of time and effort to caring for her mother in the past few years.
Okay, item 18 is the town administrator's report.
Sure, I'll keep this relatively brief, too. Most currently, and I hope I'm not stealing someone's thunder, the Veterans Day event that was put on Saturday was one of the it was fantastic from start to finish. It was a cold day. We marched up Canton Ave, each of us, and it was just to get here and see the crowd that was already here, and the band, and all the people, and just the entire presentation from start to finish, I thought was thoroughly impressive. So hats off to obviously all the veterans out there that serve our country every day. Kevin Cook and Barbara in particular, and Bill Ritchie, who put the downstairs together, and Mary Ann Sullivan for allowing them to use the Council on Aging, and all the speakers. It was a great day. It really was. So.
And the high school kids, they really make it with the music.
They certainly do. I think that all in all, I mean, we're so lucky to have so many committed people, and the crowd was great, but just to see the look and also to hear from people that served how thankful they were. And really, we're the ones that are thankful that they serve. So it was nice. And I think the chair that is now down in the lobby, I think a lot of people that had served and went and saw that, it made them feel very, very special. And I think it was a great addition. And so, yeah, it's all driven by, a passionate Veterans Affairs agent in Kevin Craig. And we're very lucky.
He did a great job. I told you that. I went to the Boston one right after that, and just everyone that came, leadership-wise, everyone and all the Vietnam-era veterans that came out. Tommy Curran, who I've known him since he was at the County Hospital, and He could write a book. He did a great job with it. He really did.
He was exceptional.
He did a great
It was
job.
very well
He really
done.
did.
And our Legion members, let's not forget
Yes,
them.
the Legion and
100%.
They always
Frank, yep.
do a nice job.
Very fortunate.
Barbara.
They step up every time, and Barbara as well.
Great job.
So, team effort.
Yep.
It was very good.
Town meeting, right? Successful special town meeting. Moderator Hiss, Clerk Galvin, Warrant Committee, very new Warrant Committee, Chair George Asher, Planning Board and all the work they had to do, this board, Steve O'Donnell and all the town meeting members. I thought it was a great event. It's just a true showing of the democracy in this town and how it works. It's really neat to participate in it, so I thought that was great.
It was only 2 nights.
Right, yeah, that too. Andrews,
wanted one.
right.
I didn't think that would happen.
Andrews Park Playground, they're getting closer. The cold weather at night's not helping them put some of the stuff down, but there is progress being made. Hopefully the weather will break later this week and we'll get some time. And hopefully kids will get to enjoy it before the snow falls. But just another asset that's coming to the town that will be as highly used, I'm sure, as the Shields Playground is.
You look at Shields Playground every day, it's packed. Yeah. It's great to see.
Yeah, really good.
Real community resource.
A couple of items for next agenda. A couple things. So Joe Prondak, our building commissioner, came to me. I mentioned this to you, Mr. Wells, about possibly partnering with the Milton Public School System to come up with a school-type, elementary school-type nursery in town where you take either kindergarten or first grade students and you plant a tree. And they nurse that tree through, the 3, 4, 5 years it takes them to get through elementary school, and I'm not sure how long it takes to nurse a tree before a tree can be planted, but come up with a supply of trees to plant to mitigate some of the attrition that Mr. Taylor and the Shade Tree Advisory Committee came up with. So we'd need a couple of things. We'd need the willingness of the school department to entertain the thought like this. We'd need land, right, possibly town land, and we'd need, a formula for which to figure out how to do this. But it was just a pretty novel idea that Joe had presented to me, and I thought it was kind of neat.
Nice outside-the-box thought to include community kids and, schools and everybody to be a part of, something that's much needed.
Yeah, 30 years from now, you drive by and tell your kids, I planted that tree.
I nursed that tree, that's right.
How many
Something like
elementary
that.
school kids do you think we have?
So there's 1,200.
A year new? First grade?
There's about 350 kindergarten kids.
350 trees.
Yep. So just a thought. Joe bounced it off me. I said, gee, that sounds like a great idea. So we'll see. Just something out there. The last thing is just, the DCI water agreement was signed, finally, for all three parties, tri-party agreement. All three attorneys agreed to it, signed it last week. TCI has it. We'll all get a copy of it. So the water agreement with the Blue Hill Ski Area is in place. Prior to the weather hopefully not turning that cold. And I need to thank MassDOT. They accelerated the Randolph Ave Chickatobit Road tip project from federal fiscal year 21 to federal fiscal year 19. So I'm going to go in on Thursday and testify at 10 Park Plaza at the Transportation Building, thanking them and just obviously voicing my support for that project.
That's a big deal and much needed. I think that give credit to our public safety and for the speed calming that they've done already there, but and also to the residents that were very active in this process. And that's it's much needed and overdue. So thanks to you, Mike, and thanks to MassDOT and Dottie Daly from MassDOT, who's really been an advocate for us.
Yeah.
So we're preliminary on what they would actually do. You got a timeline as to what fiscal year it'll be in.
Right. So they're moving it up to next fiscal year, which means it could be advertised. Work could be advertised in that. So this is a step in the right direction. We'd love to see that move down the corridor, right? Where we have the VMS board, which we're getting rave reviews for. They moved it up from Ridgewood more southerly, in the northbound lane, and it really captures. If you're driving southbound and you look in your rearview mirror, you see people hitting their brake lights when they see that sign. So hopefully it's making an impact down there. I know the chief's been putting some cars down there as well to patrol. It's that there are a lot of volume problems in town. That's a speeding problem there. That's a high rate of
I
speed.
take that route an awful lot, as I tell you. I took it coming back here to the meeting tonight. I will say, in my opinion, traffic has slowed down because of it. I see a lot of 40s as opposed to the 50s and 60s that I used to see, and I think it's, I do think that it has worked, because when it wasn't up there and I was doing 50 going too fast, cars were going by me at 60. They're not doing that when I'm going at the speed limit that I should be going. So that's just my opinion, but that's what I see. And I'm on there a lot.
We've had success with the 5 smaller ones in town, and we're going to order 5 more. There's a demand. Yeah, there's a demand in town for more. We do have to move them currently. We moved one from Brook Road over to Governor's Road. They are collecting data. Tom McCarthy's looking at that data. It's great. It collects both volume and average speed miles. So this will be something that we'll tie up, and I can present to this board probably in about a month or so. They're collecting all the information, and then review it with the chief and see what's necessary and what policing and enforcement can take place from that. But there was a demand, and the people that have them love them, and they don't want them to move. We did tell them, we told Pleasant Street it's temporary, or it's going to move. But I think if we get another 5, it should alleviate that problem of having to move them around. So a couple more things, but we can talk about it at a later date. But
I'll be brief. Thank you for that update. That was excellent. I just want to thank the Troop 2 Webelos that invited me out to speak to them last Sunday. They were armed with all kinds of excellent questions related to energy efficiency in town. They're learning all the time on stuff, and some of these kids, members of their student council in school, they talked about solar. They talked about the LED lights, and they were well-versed. And it's just great to see these young kids and the leaders of those packs, so involved. And I had a request from them, and so I hope that we'd consider this, that, we talk about giving youth opportunity, we talk about, different things that the kids want to be a part of. They may want to have a sense of being on committees themselves in town to make a difference. And so it goes right along the lines of what Joe Prondak said about that, that's at a younger age. But I think that maybe at some point we could listen to some of these thoughts that these kids have about what type of committees that they may want to serve on to make a difference in their community as we continue to get younger people involved. And because sometimes their answers, they can be smarter than us. And so it was satisfying to be able to listen to them. I was very impressed by them. So.
It's made Mr. Cronin's night. You're talking about the Webelos.
Yeah. And that's all I have.
I just have 2 quick things. One is I have followed up with town council, as we discussed at the last meeting, which was one of the nights before town meeting, about extending the town administrator's contract, and I have not heard back from town council. He's going to put me in touch with someone else in his office, so I'm hoping to do that in the next week and then be able to report at the next meeting and have the follow-up conversation. It came up under new business the last time, and we just want to have a discussion about that. We're all open to having that discussion.
We are. We certainly are.
I'm just going to get the information from
We do it
council.
tonight? On a motion, Mr. Chairman?
And then the second thing is on Wednesday of this week at 6 to 8 at the Transportation Building in Boston, the FAA and Massport RNF study, there's going to be an update report on that. So I think everyone knows about that. But
sure.
I don't know if both of you are able to go or if Mike's able to go. I'm going to go unless there's some last-minute crisis at the office. But if there's any comments or anything we want to offer, if anyone just wants to let Mike know.
Pass them on to Michael. Okay, sure.
And,
2 things. One's affordable housing, and then I have a second one as well, so I have to pick which one of the 2 I want to go with.
But if there's any comments, we can just filter them.
yeah, send them to me. Yep.
Okay.
And there are other residents attending too, so they may be able to bring up some of the points as well.
Excellent.
No, I just want to follow up on echo Michael's and David's thoughts on Veterans Day, but I really want to give a shout out. For several years now, I've gone to Cunningham, has quite a Veterans Day celebration that takes place each year. And Dr. Red, but I really got to give a shout out to Maria McNosa, who's really been the person behind this each year. This is her last year having a kid in Cunningham, so she's, it was a little bit emotional. She was a trooper in it, but Marie, just a quick story, Marie's dad served in World War II. Billy Kelly was a Boston fire captain, and he served on a destroyer known as the USS Benyon, and Benyon was in the most decisive battles of the Pacific War, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and for 30-some-odd years, he started this with another Milton resident 34 years ago, a Benyon reunion of the sailors in that crew who were in that battle. At that time, there were 66 of them alive. The first reunion was held here in Boston. Billy died in 2001. His wife, Margaret, and Marie, and Billy, and all these other, there were only 4 left alive of the 66. For 34 years, they've gone somewhere in this country every year to celebrate that crew and those sailors, what they gave to the country. And Marie is a huge, huge supporter of veterans, and as the dad of a veteran, a Marine Corps vet, combat vet, I'm very honored to be there, and she really did a great job. We know how much Michael will give back in so many ways, but I want to give Maria a shout out this last year, her last year of doing it. So
that's great.
I'm glad to be there. Huge crowd. I mean, almost as big as what we had. I couldn't believe how many people were there.
Wow. Okay, citizen speak response.
I think we covered it, really.
I think we covered it in our meeting with the Falcone project. Future agenda items, obviously, we'll be rediscussing the pilot after everybody takes in this information at our next meeting. Any other items?
There's one that I want to bring back, and we talked about it over the summer at some point, about the health insurance for elected officials. To some extent, it probably relates to this 3 to 5 member selection, because that's one of the reasons I think we should examine it, is budgetary-wise. Now, 2 additional people, it goes from 6 to 8 people would be eligible. So I'd like to bring that back at maybe one of the December meetings. I've asked Paige Eppolito, the Assistant Town Administrator, and for some information. I know Town Council has asked her for information as well. And
I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad that you brought that back up, because I think that we need to do that. I think we all agree that that was when we met down in the Blue conference room, that's something that we should, so maybe we can get that on that December 11th agenda. Great, thank you. Okay.
I have 2 things, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The annual audit is nearly complete, and the audit committee would like to come in on the 27th to report with Powers and Sullivan. And then I'm going to have Birch Eimer, Hillary Waite, and Arlene Zuniga here to meet everyone, ask them some questions, what their philosophies are and their management styles. But 3 new employees in the town, 2 of them funded by the override. Great employees. And I think the town public viewing audience needs to meet them and understand what an asset they are to the town, each of them. So
it'd be great to have them.
And briefly.
I'm just going to end with one last thing, and I want to go back to the editorial that was in the Times and echo the sentiments of both of you very clearly articulated in your letters to the editor. I mean, although I happened to see he was here the other day, the one point I do want to note is that for all the work that the Town Government Study Committee did, all the input, not once did we ever hear anyone, either a full member of this board, any board, a department head, anyone, speak against their work and what they put forward before a town meeting. And what I asked you, David, we were all there one time, and then the second time, the 2 of you went before the warrant committee. And not once did the author of that editorial, who happens to also sit in the warrant committee, ever take his opportunity to question you, any of you, either of you, or any of us, about his thoughts on that, yet he just chose to write that article. And I think that you both did a great job articulating the point. Democracy is a great thing, and we have no purer form of democracy than what exists in this town right now. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to open up now a meeting of the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Fund. And it's related to the Milton Residence Fund fuel assistance request. Diane Ferrari, unable to meet with the board tonight, has submitted a request for the winter of 2017-18 for a fuel assistance fund. Last year, the trustees granted $15,000. Currently, the balance, the Governor Stoughton Fund, is $263,425.68. So open up that for discussion here.
I think we should keep it level with what we gave last year.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't disagree. Only because if you look at, and only because I've known a little bit of experience with this, the price of fuel is exorbitantly higher than it was a year ago. And just, I mean, we have 263. Do we give money to anything else for her other than this?
Yes, the holiday assistant.
That's only, what, 10?
That's 5. And then, isn't there might be a different one, might be the food pantry. I know there's a food request, but that might be the pantry.
I'm just thinking for this year, perhaps we maybe go to 20. Just because gas has really gone up that much, fuel oils, and she struggles so hard to do this, and this is the one big thing we do. I'm not saying we have to do it every year. I mean, if it drops down or like it was, maybe go back to 15 this year, but I just think fuel prices are really up there right now, and they're not going to come down this winter. And 5,000 against 263 is really not a lot of money, and this is the year we're going to get the Pulte money anyway, so
I had a conversation with town council today. It looks like he's working with them, yeah, so it's looking like January 3rd for a closing date. So we should see that $5.35 million in the trustees fund for that.
She hasn't specifically, I'm just reading her letter, she hasn't specifically requested a certain amount, but it would be possible to approve 15 now, and if she needed it during January, February,
okay with that.
she could come back later on in the year.
Yeah, I think that that's reasonable.
Can we relay that to her, that if she had to come back for this?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and I think that, Richard, you're right, that gas has, it's inflated, and I think that, we want to do our best to be able to serve these people. So why don't we start with this, and with the open mind that, it's very possible that she could come back because it's a necessity, and we can help make a difference, and I think that's the key.
Yeah.
And be willing to look at what actually is necessary.
Okay.
I only say that because the number of people
I get you. I
requesting
know that,
could
right.
change from year to year.
I'll make a motion to approve a grant in the amount of $15,000 to Milton Residents Fund for fuel assistance and for needy Milton residents throughout the 2017-2018 season.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
No, I'm fine with
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn on the meeting of the Board of the Trustees?
So moved.
Okay, at this point, I am going to ask us to enter into executive session, strategy with respect to non-union personnel. Ms. Conlon.
Yeah, but don't we have to read the rest of it, because I don't think it's valid unless the whole thing, about the reasoning. Yeah, because I think then it's not
I lost my place, I'm sorry.
compliance with the open meeting law.
Paragraph above 24. To enter an
Okay,
executive
I'm
session.
sorry, here, I lost it. I was on the wrong page down bottom. To make a motion to enter into executive session, discuss strategy with respect to the non-union personnel, consolidated facilities director, believing that having such discussion in open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the board, and to return to open session to adjourn. Ms. Conlon?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Burns? Yes. We're now in executive session.